The crystal champagne flute slipped from Claudette's manicured fingers, shattering across marble as Nathaniel Montgomery's Arabic flowed through the ballroom. A test, a trap for the social climbers circling his billions. Silence. Then, from beside the dessert table, the maid in the plain black uniform responded in flawless Arabic, her Sudanese accent rich with poetry his business associates could never match. Their eyes met. The room held its breath. His mother's charity gala would never be the same. Teresa knew him only as the son who appeared at these mandatory family events with practiced smiles and empty eyes, who spoke when spoken to and disappeared the moment propriety allowed. She'd served him coffee exactly 4 times in 3 years. He'd never looked at her face. "Darling, you simply must tell me about Monaco," Claudette Beaumont purred, pressing closer to Nate than the October chill required. Her red dress probably cost what Teresa made in 6 months. "I heard your yacht was absolutely magnificent." Nate's smile was polished glass. "It served its purpose." "And what purpose is that?" Another woman, blonde and determined, inserted herself into the conversation. "Business or pleasure? Is there a difference?" Nate's tone was pleasant, bored, his attention already drifting toward the exit. Teresa Hassan had learned to make herself invisible. In the 3 years she'd worked for the Montgomery estate, she'd perfected the art of moving through rooms without disturbing the air, of anticipating needs before they were spoken, of existing as function rather than person. Tonight, at Vivian Montgomery's annual autumn charity gala, invisibility was essential. The Connecticut estate's grand ballroom glittered with old money and new ambition, 500 guests dressed in designer labels that cost more than Teresa's yearly salary, all competing to be seen by the one man in the room who seemed determined not to see any of them. Teresa moved along the dessert table, replacing empty champagne flutes with practiced efficiency. She'd learned the rhythm of these events, the desperate energy of people trying to secure proximity to power, the transactional nature of every conversation, the way genuine connection withered under the weight of so much wanting. It exhausted her, and she only had to watch it from the margins. What exhausted her more was the knowing. The knowing that she was smarter than half the guests in this room, that her unfinished degree in international relations from Hartford Community College represented more genuine intellectual curiosity than most of their Ivy League credentials purchased by family donations. The knowing that her Sudanese grandmother had spoken 4 languages and raised her on poetry and politics and pride, that Teresa had dreams bigger than this estate, this uniform, this careful invisibility. But dreams required money, and money required work, and this work paid enough to keep her in online classes and her Uncle Bob in his rent-controlled apartment, and hope alive that someday, somehow, she'd finish her education and build the life her grandmother had sacrificed everything to give her a chance at. Nathaniel Montgomery stood near the French doors leading to the terrace, his 6'2" frame draped in custom Tom Ford, dark hair slightly disheveled in that carefully careless way that only the truly wealthy could achieve. At 38, he'd built a tech empire that rivaled Silicon Valley's giants, his encryption software securing communications for governments and corporations worldwide. Forbes called him elusive, the tabloids called him impossible, his mother called him exhausting. "More champagne," a woman demanded without looking at Teresa, thrusting her empty glass forward like a weapon. "Of course." Teresa replaced it smoothly, already moving toward the next cluster of guests. That's when she heard it. Nate's voice, louder than before, carrying across conversations in a language that made her freeze mid-step. Arabic. Formal, classical Arabic with a slight Gulf accent, the kind learned in business meetings in Dubai and Abu Dhabi rather than at a grandmother's knee in Khartoum. "I find it interesting," he was saying, his tone conversational, but his words cutting. "How many people claim international sophistication without understanding a word beyond English? We speak of global markets while remaining profoundly provincial." The conversations around him stuttered, uncertain. Faces smiled blankly, not understanding but afraid to admit it. Claudette's laugh was crystalline and false. Nate continued in Arabic, his words now openly mocking. "I could say anything right now. I could insult every person in this room. and they would nod and smile because they're more interested in my bank account than genuine communication. Silence spread like spilled wine. Teresa's hands tightened on her tray. She should keep moving, should maintain her invisibility, should absolutely not. That's not entirely fair, she heard herself say in Arabic, her Sudanese accent warm and precise, words flowing before wisdom could stop them. Perhaps they're simply being polite, giving you the benefit of the doubt that you're saying something worth hearing rather than using language as a weapon to prove superiority. The champagne flute dropped from Claudette's fingers. The crystal explosion across marble seemed to echo for hours, though it could only have been seconds. Every face in the ballroom turned toward the sound, then followed the trajectory of shocked stares to find their source. Teresa Hassan, the maid. Still holding her tray, her plain black uniform stark against the jeweled excess around her, her dark skin flushed with horror at her own audacity, her brown eyes wide with the realization that she'd just committed professional suicide. But it was Nathaniel Montgomery's face that held her paralyzed. The boredom had vanished, replaced by something intense and searching. His gray eyes locked on hers with the full force of attention she'd watched him withhold from everyone else all evening. He stared at her like she'd suddenly materialized from thin air, like she'd spoken an incantation that broke a spell he hadn't known he was under. "Well," he said softly in Arabic, taking 3 steps toward her that cleared a path through the crowd like Moses at the Red Sea. "That's the first interesting thing anyone has said to me in months." Teresa's Uncle Bob appeared at her elbow with the practiced intervention of someone who'd worked service jobs for 40 years. "I apologize, Mr. Montgomery." Teresa was just heading back to the kitchen. "I asked her a question," Nate interrupted in English, his eyes never leaving Teresa's face. It would be rude not to wait for her answer. Vivian Montgomery materialized with the supernatural speed of mothers sensing disaster. At 65, she was still beautiful in that preserved way of women who'd never worked a day that left calluses, her silver hair swept into a flawless chignon, her cream Chanel suit armor against the chaos her son had just unleashed. "Nathaniel, darling, I'm sure Miss Hassan has duties to attend to. The catering manager mentioned they needed help in the West kitchen." It was a dismissal, a command, a way to restore order to an evening that had lurched sideways into something dangerous. Teresa seized it. "Yes, Mrs. Montgomery, my apologies." She met Nate's eyes for one more second, seeing something there she couldn't name, surprise, interest, hunger, before she turned and walked toward the service exit with as much dignity as her shaking legs allowed. Behind her, conversation resumed in forced brightness, everyone pretending nothing extraordinary had happened, that the natural order hadn't been briefly disrupted by a maid who spoke Arabic better than most of them spoke English. In the service corridor, Teresa leaned against the wall and pressed her palms to her hot face. What had she been thinking? She hadn't been thinking. She'd heard that mocking tone, that casual cruelty disguised as sophistication, and her grandmother's voice had risen in her memory. "Teresa Habibti, never let anyone use education as a weapon against others. Knowledge is a gift, not a blade." "Girl, what did you just do?" Bob appeared beside her, his weathered face creased with worry. At 60, her father's brother had the dignified bearing of someone who'd made peace with how the world worked, who'd learned to navigate its injustices without letting them destroy him. He'd gotten Teresa this job, had vouched for her reliability, and she'd just repaid him by committing professional suicide in front of Connecticut's elite. "I don't know," she whispered. "Uncle Bob, I'm sorry, he was being so cruel, and nobody was calling him on it because they couldn't understand what he was saying, and you think a man like Nathaniel Montgomery wants to be challenged by the help?" Bob kept his voice gentle, but the concern was sharp. "Baby girl, men like him don't see women like us as people who get to have opinions. We're furniture that talks." "I know." Teresa straightened, smoothing her uniform. "I know, and I'm sorry. I'll apologize if he complains. I'll do whatever I need to do to keep this job." "It's not just the job," Bob said quietly. "It's the way the world works. Rich white men don't like being embarrassed in front of their friends, especially not by—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Back in the ballroom, Nate accepted another glass of champagne he wouldn't drink and tried to focus on the conversation swirling around him. Impossible. His mind had snagged on that moment like fabric on a nail, unable to move forward or back. The maid, Teresa, his mother had called her, had responded in Arabic. Not just responded, but challenged him with the kind of precise eloquence that revealed genuine fluency, the kind you didn't get from apps or business courses. Her accent had been Sudanese, the softened consonants and musical rhythm unmistakable. She'd grown up speaking this language, had learned it the way he'd learned English, from family and love and belonging. And she'd called him out for using it as a weapon. She was right. The realization sat uncomfortably in his chest. He'd been testing the room, yes, exposing the shallow cosmopolitanism of people who jetted to Dubai for business deals, but never bothered to learn the language, who hired translators instead of building bridges. But he'd also been cruel, using his knowledge to mock people who hadn't had his opportunities, his years building networks across the Middle East. He'd been a hypocrite, basically, and she'd had the courage to tell him so. "Nate, darling, are you listening?" His mother's hand on his arm, her smile fixed and desperate. Claudette was just saying, "Mother, who is she?" He kept his voice low, conversational. "The woman who spoke Arabic. Teresa." Vivian's smile tightened fractionally. "One of the household staff. Hassan, I believe. Her uncle Bob works in maintenance. She's been with us about 3 years." 3 years. He'd been coming to this estate for 3 years of mandatory family events, and he'd never noticed her. Never looked at her face, never registered her existence beyond the function she served. The realization made him feel complicit in something shameful. Is she educated? Nathaniel, really, this is hardly... Is she educated? He never used this tone with his mother, never pulled rank or pushed. But something had shifted in the past 10 minutes. Some door had opened that he couldn't close. Vivian sighed. "I believe she takes online courses, community college. She's very reliable, always on time, never causes problems." The implication hung heavy, until tonight. "I need to speak with her." "Absolutely not." His mother's hand tightened on his arm. "Nathaniel, I love you, but sometimes you have no idea how the world works. You cannot pursue the help like she's one of your business acquisitions. Do you have any idea what that would look like? The tabloids would have a field day." "I'm not pursuing anyone. I want to apologize." "Then send her a note, a generous bonus. Handle it appropriately." Vivian's eyes were desperate now. "Please, darling, for me. This gala is important. Everything's always important," Nate heard himself say. "The galas, the appearances, the right connections, the proper behavior. When do we get to do something real?" He walked away before she could answer, heading not for the service exit but for the terrace, needing air, needing space, needing to think about why a 30-second interaction with a woman he'd never noticed had just cracked something open in his carefully constructed life. In the West Kitchen, Teresa helped load the industrial dishwasher with hands that had finally stopped shaking. The other staff members gave her sympathetic looks or curious glances, but nobody asked questions. They'd all learned long ago that survival in service meant keeping your head down and your observations to yourself. "You okay, honey?" Mrs. Lee, the head cook, squeezed her shoulder. "Vivian can be harsh when events don't go perfectly." "I'm fine, just embarrassed." Teresa forced a smile. "I shouldn't have said anything." "Maybe not," Mrs. Lee agreed. "But between you and me, that boy needed someone to check him. Too much money, not enough sense of what real people deal with." Teresa didn't respond. She finished loading the dishwasher, gathered her coat from the staff room, and found Bob waiting by the service entrance to drive her home. They made the 15-minute trip to her studio apartment in silence, both lost in their own worried thoughts about whether she'd still have a job tomorrow. Nate stood on the terrace long after the last guest departed, long after his mother had given up trying to manage him, and retired to her suite in exhaustion, long after the catering company had finished packing up and driven away. The October air was crisp with coming winter, the estate's grounds rolling away into darkness, punctuated by security lights. He pulled out his phone, pulled up his contacts, scrolled to his business partner in Dubai. Tariq answered on the second ring despite the time difference. "Either you're drunk or in trouble. Which is it, Habibi?" "Neither, maybe both." Nate laughed without humor. "Tell me something. In all our years working together, have I been an arrogant bastard? Silence. Then, do you want the honest answer or the one that preserves our business relationship? That bad? No, Tariq said carefully. Not bad, just American. Efficient. Transactional. You see problems, you solve them. You see opportunities, you capitalize. But you don't always see people. Someone saw me tonight. Nate wasn't sure why he was sharing this. Called me out for using Arabic as a weapon, and she was right. She? Interest sharpened Tariq's voice. Tell me everything. Nate did. The test, the response, the shock that had reverberated through his carefully controlled evening like a stone through glass. So what are you going to do? Tariq asked when he finished. I don't know. My mother says send a note and a bonus and forget it happened. Your mother is protecting her world. You have to decide if it's still your world too. After they hung up, Nate stood in the darkness for another hour, replaying those 30 seconds over and over. The surprise in her eyes when she'd realized what she'd done. The dignity in her bearing even as his mother dismissed her. The way she'd looked at him, not with calculation or want, but with disappointment, like she'd expected better and he'd failed to deliver. When had anyone last expected better from him? At 2 a.m, in her studio apartment, Teresa finally stopped replaying the disaster and opened her laptop. She had an international relations paper due Monday, a discussion of how language shapes diplomatic power dynamics. The irony wasn't lost on her. She wrote for 3 hours, channeling her humiliation and anger and confusion into analysis of how linguistic exclusion reinforced economic hierarchies, how the ability to speak someone's language conferred social power, how translation was always an act of interpretation and therefore control. At 5 a.m., she submitted the paper and fell into bed exhausted. At 6 a.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Hassan, a woman's voice, professionally pleasant. This is Catherine from Montgomery Estate Management. Mr. Nathaniel Montgomery has requested your presence in the estate library at 10 a.m. today. This is a paid appointment, and transportation can be arranged if needed. Teresa's heart stopped. What is this about? Mr. Montgomery didn't specify. Shall I confirm your attendance? What choice did she have? Yes, I'll be there. She hung up and stared at the ceiling, wondering if she was about to be fired in person or if something even stranger was about to happen. The library at Montgomery Estate was designed to intimidate. 2 stories of mahogany shelving, first editions and leather bindings, a rolling ladder that screamed old money, and windows overlooking gardens that probably required a full-time staff to maintain. Teresa had cleaned this room exactly twice in 3 years, both times when the family was traveling, both times feeling like an interloper in a space that wasn't meant for people like her. Now she stood in that space at precisely 10 a.m., wearing her best dress, a simple navy sheath her grandmother had bought her for college interviews that never happened, and tried to control her breathing. Nathaniel Montgomery entered exactly on time, wearing jeans and a charcoal sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Without the formal wear from last night, he looked younger, more human, though the intensity in his gray eyes was unchanged. Miss Hassan, thank you for coming. He gestured to one of the leather chairs near the fireplace. Please, sit. Mr. Montgomery, if this is about last night, I apologize. It was completely inappropriate. It was completely appropriate, he interrupted, settling into the chair across from her. I was being an arrogant bastard, and you called me on it. I'm the one who owes you an apology. Teresa blinked. Whatever she'd expected, it wasn't this. I used Arabic as a weapon, Nate continued, his voice measured. I was testing people, exposing their limitations, feeling superior about knowledge I only have because of business opportunities most of them will never access. It was cruel and petty, and you were right to challenge me. I was still out of line, Teresa managed. You're a guest here, and I'm... You're what? His gaze was direct, demanding honesty. Staff? Therefore not allowed to have opinions, not allowed to call out bad behavior when you witness it? That's how the world works. That's how we've agreed to let the world work. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me about your grandmother. The subject change was so abrupt Teresa nearly stumbled over her response. What? Your accent. Sudanese. Specifically Khartoum region, unless I'm very wrong. That's not something you learn in a classroom. You grew up speaking Arabic. Heat crept up Teresa's neck. My grandmother raised me there until I was 12, after my parents died. Then we came to the U.S. to live with my uncle. I'm sorry for your loss. The words were simple, genuine. What language did she speak with you? Arabic at home, English for school. Teresa's hands twisted in her lap. She used to say language was a bridge, not a wall, that knowing someone's words was the first step to knowing their heart. Something shifted in Nate's expression. She sounds remarkable. She was. Past tense. Always past tense now, 4 years since cancer had taken the woman who'd been mother and teacher and anchor. She made sure I could move between worlds, made sure I understood that being Sudanese and American wasn't a contradiction, it was a gift. And now? Now I work to pay for online classes and try to remember that dreams don't die. They just take longer than expected. Teresa met his eyes, suddenly exhausted with pretense. Why am I here, Mr. Montgomery? Call me Nate. He stood, walked to the window, his back to her. I've spent the past 12 hours thinking about what you said, about using language as a weapon, about the privilege I've abused without even recognizing it as privilege. That's very, introspective of you. He turned back and his smile was wry. Is it? Or is it just another form of self-absorption? Rich man has moment of clarity, feels briefly bad, then goes back to his comfortable life? Teresa had no safe answer to that, so she said nothing. I want to know, Nate continued, moving back to his chair, but not sitting, his energy restless. What you think about global power dynamics, about how the U.S. engages with the Middle East and Africa, about whether technology is genuinely democratizing access or just creating new hierarchies. You want my thesis? Teresa couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. I want your thoughts, your real thoughts, not the filtered version you'd give in a job interview or a college essay. His intensity was almost overwhelming. You challenged me last night. I want to understand the mind behind that challenge. This was dangerous territory. Every instinct screamed at Teresa to be careful, to remember the power dynamics at play, to protect herself and her job and her uncle's position. But something in Nate's face, the genuine curiosity, the unexpected vulnerability, made her decide to risk honesty. Fine, she said, but I'm not sitting for this conversation. She stood, moved to the bookshelf, pulled out a volume on Middle Eastern history. The U.S. talks about partnership with Arab nations while treating their languages and cultures as problems to be managed rather than perspectives to be understood. We build military bases and economic alliances, but rarely genuine cultural exchange. Even our aid programs often come with conditions that reflect our values rather than the needs of the communities we claim to serve. She turned to face him, gaining confidence. And technology? It's democratizing for people who already have infrastructure, education, and economic stability. For everyone else, it's just a new way to watch the rich get richer. Your encryption software protects governments and corporations. What does it do for a farmer in Sudan or a refugee in Lebanon? Nate's expression was unreadable. Teresa couldn't tell if she'd gone too far, if she'd just talked herself out of a job, if... Keep going, he said softly. What? Keep going. What else? He sat now, leaning forward like a student in the most important lecture of his life. What am I missing? What does someone with your perspective see that I'm blind to? For the next hour, they talked. Teresa forgot to be careful, forgot the power imbalance, forgot everything except the exhilaration of being heard. She critiqued Western foreign policy and Silicon Valley arrogance. He pushed back with economic realities and security concerns. She countered with on-the-ground consequences he'd never considered. He admitted blind spots she hadn't expected him to acknowledge. Arabic and English tangled together, language switching naturally as concepts demanded different linguistic frameworks. Teresa quoted Sudanese poets. Nate referenced Dubai business leaders. They debated, disagreed, found unexpected common ground. Teresa was mid-sentence about refugee displacement when she stumbled backward, startled by her own gesturing, and Nate moved without thinking. His hand caught her arm, steadying her, and they both froze. The touch was electric. Simple contact, hand to arm, but the current that ran between them was anything but simple. "Sorry," Nate said, but he didn't immediately let go. "It's fine," Teresa whispered, but she didn't pull away. They stood there, closer than appropriate, his hand warm through her sleeve, her pulse hammering in her throat. The moment stretched, expanded, filled with possibility and danger in equal measure. A knock at the door shattered it. Bob entered, his face carefully neutral. "Mr. Montgomery, your mother asked me to let you know lunch is being served." "Tell her I'm not hungry." Nate's voice was clipped. She was quite insistent. Bob's eyes found Teresa's, full of warning. Reality crashed back. Teresa stepped away from Nate's touch, suddenly aware of how this must look. Her in her best dress, him in casual clothes, an hour alone together in a room designed for intimacy. "I should go," she said quickly. "Thank you for the conversation." "Wait." Nate's command was soft but absolute. "Have dinner with me, tomorrow night. Not here, somewhere neutral." "That's not appropriate." "Appropriate." He laughed without humor. "Last night wasn't appropriate. This morning wasn't appropriate. But it was real." Teresa's throat tightened. "I can't afford real, Mr. Montgomery. Real costs too much." "Nate. Call me Nate. What if I just want to continue a conversation with the most interesting person I've met in years? Then I'd say you need to meet more interesting people." But her conviction was wavering. "Miss Hassan," Bob said quietly, "we should go." Teresa moved toward the door, toward safety, toward the life she understood. At the threshold, she looked back. Nate stood by the window, backlit by October sun, his expression unguarded in a way she suspected was rare. "Greenhouse," she heard herself say. "Midnight. If you really want to talk, that's where I'll be." She walked out before she could see his reaction, before she could talk herself out of what she'd just invited, before Bob could lecture her about the foolishness of moths and flames. In the library, Nate stood motionless, replaying those last words. The greenhouse, midnight, an invitation, a test, a chance. He pulled out his phone, texted Tariq. "I think I just fell through the looking glass." The response came immediately. "About damn time. Try not to fuck it up." Outside, in Bob's ancient Toyota, Teresa stared out the window and wondered if she'd just made the best or worst decision of her life. "You know this can't go anywhere good," Bob said finally, his voice heavy with the weight of lived experience. "I know. Men like him don't end up with women like us. They play, they get bored, they move on." "I know." Teresa closed her eyes. "I know all of that, Uncle Bob. But just once, just for a little while, I want to feel like I'm not invisible. Like someone sees me as more than the help." "Baby girl." Bob's hand found hers squeezed. "You were never invisible. You just been waiting for someone worthy of seeing you. I just hope to God that man is it." Teresa hoped so too. But hope, she'd learned, was a luxury that rarely worked out for people like her. Chapter 2. The greenhouse at Montgomery Estate was Teresa's secret sanctuary. Built in the 1920s by Nathaniel's great-grandmother, it had fallen into gentle neglect over the decades, becoming more functional than ornamental. The family kept it for fresh herbs and out-of-season vegetables, but nobody visited after dark. Nobody except Teresa. She discovered it during her second month of employment, when insomnia had driven her to walk the grounds at 3 a.m. The glass structure had glowed softly in moonlight, and she'd found the door unlocked, an invitation she couldn't resist. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and mint, earth and growth. She'd started coming regularly, tending plants that nobody else noticed, finding peace among living things that didn't care about her bank account or her skin color or her unfinished degree. Now, at 11:45 p.m. on a Sunday night, she sat on the wooden bench near the jasmine vines and tried to convince herself she wasn't making a catastrophic mistake. He wouldn't come. Of course he wouldn't come. Whatever curiosity had driven their library conversation had probably evaporated the moment she left. He had realized the absurdity of midnight meetings with the help and sent a polite message through his mother's office, thanking her for her time and terminating her employment with a generous severance package. At 11:58, she stood to leave. At midnight exactly, the greenhouse door opened. Nathaniel Montgomery stepped inside, and Teresa's breath caught. He'd changed into dark jeans and a simple black Henley, his hair slightly damp like he'd just showered. In the soft glow of the security lights filtering through glass, he looked younger than his 38 years, less like a billionaire, and more like a man searching for something he'd lost. "You came?" she said stupidly. "You doubted I would?" He moved toward her slowly, giving her space to bolt if she chose. "I doubted you should." Teresa wrapped her arms around herself. "This is insane. Your mother would have a stroke. My uncle thinks I've lost my mind. This morning's conversation was already inappropriate." "Stop." Nate's voice was gentle but firm. "Stop telling me why this is wrong, and tell me why you're here anyway." Teresa opened her mouth, closed it, searched for the careful answer. Found only truth. "Because I'm tired of being invisible. Because for 1 hour this morning, someone saw me. Really saw me. Not the maid, not the charity case, not the girl who couldn't afford to finish college. Just me. And that's worth the risk?" "I don't know yet." She met his eyes. "Why are you here?" Nate moved to the jasmine vines, touched the white blooms with careful fingers. "I've spent 15 years building an empire. I've negotiated with presidents and kings. I've turned 3 startups into billion-dollar companies. I've dated actresses and heiresses and women whose beauty could stop traffic." He turned back to her. "And I've never had a conversation that mattered. Not really. Everyone wants something from me. Everyone's performing. Everyone's calculating their next move." "And I'm different?" Teresa couldn't keep the skepticism from her voice. "I'm not calculating? I don't want something? Are you?" His gaze was direct, demanding honesty. "Calculating? I'm terrified," she admitted. "I'm terrified that this is a game I don't know how to play. That you'll get bored in a week and I'll lose my job and my uncle will lose his and I'll have destroyed everything for a few hours of feeling seen. What if I promise you won't lose your job regardless of what happens between us? Then I'd say you don't understand power dynamics as well as you think you do." Teresa's laugh was bitter. "Your promises don't protect me, Nate. They just make you feel better about the risks you're asking me to take." Silence stretched between them, heavy with truth. "You're right," Nate said finally. "I can't promise you safety. I can't even promise I won't hurt you. All I can promise is that right now, in this moment, I want to know you more than I've wanted anything in years." "Why?" The question burst from Teresa's chest. "Why me? You could have any woman in the world. Women who fit your world, who know how to navigate your circles, who wouldn't complicate everything." "Because they don't challenge me." Nate moved closer, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his gray eyes. "Because they don't call me on my bullshit. Because they see my money and my connections and my potential usefulness. But they don't see me standing in a greenhouse at midnight, desperately hoping a woman I barely know will take a chance on something real." Teresa's heart hammered against her ribs. "This is crazy." "Completely insane," he agreed. "We have nothing in common. Except language and politics and apparently a shared appreciation for Jasmine." His smile was tentative, hopeful. "Talk to me, Teresa. Not about why this won't work. Just talk to me." So she did. They sat on the wooden bench, not touching but close enough to feel each other's warmth in the cool greenhouse air. Teresa told him about her grandmother, about growing up in Khartoum before her parents' car accident, about the displacement of moving to Connecticut at 12 and feeling perpetually caught between worlds. She told him about online classes and impossible tuition and dreams that kept receding like mirages in the desert. Nate told her about building his first company at 23, about the isolation of sudden wealth, about how success had cost him every genuine relationship he'd ever had. He told her about Dubai and the years he'd spent there, learning Arabic not from tutors but from colleagues who'd become friends, building networks based on mutual respect rather than transactional exchanges. "I thought I was different," he said, his voice quiet in the plant-scented darkness. "I thought Because I'd built my wealth rather than inherited it, I was somehow more authentic than the people I grew up around. But somewhere along the way, I became exactly what I despised: disconnected, cynical, using people without even realizing that's what I was doing. You're being too hard on yourself. Teresa found herself defending him, surprising herself. You built something real. Your encryption software protects journalists and activists. That matters. Does it? His laugh was hollow. Or did I just find a way to monetize other people's need for safety? When's the last time I actually talked to the journalists using my software? When's the last time I made a decision based on impact rather than profit margin? When's the last time you let yourself be human? Teresa asked softly. When's the last time you sat in a greenhouse at midnight and talked about things that matter instead of things that make money? Nate turned to look at her, and the vulnerability in his face made her chest ache. I can't remember. Before my father died, maybe. He used to take me hiking, away from all of this. He gestured vaguely toward the estate beyond the glass. He'd talk about building things that lasted, about legacy meaning more than wealth. Then he had a heart attack at 52, and my mother spent the next decade trying to mold me into the son she thought he wanted, the perfect heir, the social asset, the walking brand. And you let her? I didn't know how to say no. I'd lost him, she'd lost her husband, and controlling me became her way of controlling her grief. By the time I realized what was happening, I'd already become the person she'd designed. He rubbed his face tiredly. God, I'm telling you things I haven't told my therapist. You have a therapist? Teresa couldn't help smiling. 3, actually. 1 for anxiety, 1 for business stress, 1 because the first 2 recommended it. His answering smile was self-deprecating. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it does buy excessive professional help. They laughed together, the sound soft and surprised, and something eased between them. The conversation flowed more naturally after that, moving from heavy revelations to lighter topics: favorite books, terrible movies they secretly loved, the way certain Arabic phrases had no English equivalent, the specific smell of rain in Khartoum versus Connecticut. Hours passed like minutes. At some point, their hands drifted together on the bench between them, fingers loosely intertwined, the touch casual but electric. Teresa found herself leaning closer to hear his quiet words, found her shoulder pressing against his, found the boundaries of appropriate distance dissolving in the intimacy of shared secrets. Tell me about your dreams, Nate said suddenly. The real ones, not the practical ones. Teresa hesitated. Dreams were dangerous things to share, especially with someone who had the resources to make them reality. She didn't want his pity or his charity, but she wanted his understanding, wanted him to see the life she imagined beyond survival. I want to finish my degree, she said slowly. International relations with a focus on conflict resolution. I want to work for an NGO, maybe the UN eventually. I want to be in rooms where decisions get made about humanitarian aid, refugee resettlement, peace negotiations. I want to use my languages, both of them, to bridge divides instead of marking difference. That's beautiful. Nate's thumb traced circles on her palm, the gesture absent but intimate. What's stopping you? Money, time, reality. Teresa tried to pull her hand away, embarrassed by the contrast between her dreams and his actualized success, but he held on gently. What if those weren't obstacles? But they are. That's what you don't understand, Nate. Your world has different physics than mine. You see a problem, you throw resources at it. I see a problem. I work 3 years to save enough to take 2 classes and hope nothing breaks in my apartment because I can't afford repairs and tuition. Don't. Teresa did pull away now, standing and moving to the jasmine vines, needing distance. Please don't offer to fix my life. I'm not a project. I'm not a charity case. If you want to know me, you have to accept that my struggle is part of who I am, not something to be solved. Nate stood but didn't approach, giving her space. I wasn't going to offer money. I was going to say I could introduce you to people at the UN. I have contacts from my Dubai work, people in humanitarian technology. No money, no charity, just connections to people who might value what you bring to the table. Teresa turned, surprised. Why would you do that? Because you're right that I don't understand your world. but I can at least try not to be an arrogant bastard about the one thing I do have. Access. You shouldn't have to wait 3 years to take 2 classes. You should be in those rooms now, using that brilliant mind for something that matters. He moved closer, his voice dropping. And before you tell me that's still charity or pity or whatever defensive wall you're building, know this: I'm not offering because I feel sorry for you. I'm offering because the world needs what you have to give, and I'm tired of watching talent go to waste because of artificial barriers. Teresa's throat tightened. She wanted to argue, wanted to maintain her pride and independence, wanted to reject the implications of accepting help from someone whose interest in her was still undefined and potentially temporary. But she was also tired. So tired of fighting every battle alone, of proving herself constantly, of watching opportunities slip by because she couldn't afford the entry fee. I don't know how to accept help, she admitted quietly. Neither do I. Nate's smile was rueful. Maybe we can figure it out together. The question hung between them, laden with possibility. This wasn't just about job connections or networking. This was about something bigger, more dangerous, more real. What are we doing? Teresa whispered. Really doing? I have no idea, Nate said honestly. All I know is that I've spent 15 years moving through my life like I'm watching it happen to someone else. And tonight, right now, I feel awake for the first time since I can remember. He stepped closer, close enough that Teresa had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. She could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive that mixed with the jasmine and made her dizzy. Tell me to leave, he said softly. Tell me this is too complicated, too risky, too impossible. Give me one good reason to walk away, and I will. Teresa searched for that reason, found her job, her uncle's position, the inevitable pain when this ended, the cruel comments from people who'd assume she was a gold digger, the way her dreams might get tangled up with his resources and become something she couldn't trust as her own. Found all of that, cataloged all the risks, and still heard herself say, I can't. Can't what? Can't give you a reason to leave. Her hand came up, trembling slightly, and touched his face. His skin was warm, the stubble on his jaw rough against her palm. I'm terrified, but I can't tell you to leave. Nate's eyes closed briefly at her touch, and when they opened again, they were molten. Teresa, don't ask permission, she interrupted. Don't make this a negotiation. If you're going to kiss me, just kiss me. He did. Nate's hands came up to frame her face with a gentleness that contrasted the desperation in his kiss. His lips were soft, questioning, giving her space to pull back even as he pulled her closer. Teresa melted into him with a small sound of surrender, her hands sliding from his face to his shoulders to the soft fabric of his shirt, anchoring herself against the dizzying sensation of falling. The kiss deepened naturally, heat building as initial restraint gave way to honest hunger. Nate's tongue traced her lower lip, and she opened for him, tasting mint and want and something indefinable that made her press closer. His hands slid from her face to her neck to her waist, spanning her ribcage with gentle possession, and she was suddenly, acutely aware of every place their bodies touched. Oh, God, he breathed against her mouth, pulling back just enough to look at her. Don't say beautiful, Teresa interrupted, her own breathing ragged. Don't make this about how I look. I was going to say terrifying, Nate said, his smile crooked and honest. You terrify me. This terrifies me. I have no idea what I'm doing. That makes 2 of us. Teresa's laugh was shaky. She rested her forehead against his chest, feeling his heart hammer beneath her cheek. We should stop. We should definitely stop. Probably. His arms tightened around her. Are we going to? Not yet. She looked up, saw her own confusion and desire reflected in his face. Just hold me for a minute. Let me pretend this isn't completely insane. They stood wrapped together in the greenhouse's humid warmth, surrounded by jasmine and possibility. As minutes stretched and blurred, Nate's hand stroked her back in soothing circles. Teresa's fingers twisted in his shirt. Neither spoke, both afraid that words would break the spell, would force them to confront the impossibility of what they were starting. Finally, reluctantly, Teresa pulled back. I need to go. I have class in the morning, and if I don't get at least 4 hours of sleep, I'll be useless. Online class? When she nodded, Nate asked, What are you taking? Diplomatic history and gender studies, thrilling combination for a Sunday morning. Her smile was tired but genuine. The history professor assigns 800 pages a week. I'm perpetually behind. I could... He caught himself. Sorry, not offering solutions, just listening. You can offer solutions, Teresa said, surprising herself. Just ask first. Don't assume. Noted. Nate stepped back, giving her space to leave, but his hand caught hers. Can I see you again? Not here, not hiding. Have dinner with me. Somewhere in the city, somewhere neutral. Your mother will know within hours. Let her know. I'm allowed to have dinner with anyone I choose. You're allowed, Teresa agreed. But I'm the help. Different rules apply. Then quit. The words were out before Nate could stop them. At her sharp look, he raised his hands. I'm not suggesting I support you or any patriarchal bullshit like that, but you're overqualified for this job. You're taking classes online because you can't afford full-time tuition and working here simultaneously. If you quit, you could maybe get financial aid, work a different job with better hours, and lose the health insurance that covers my uncle's diabetes medication, lose the staff housing allowance that makes my rent possible, lose the stability that barely keeps me afloat. Teresa's voice was sharp with the reality he didn't see. Your solutions work in your world, Nate. In mine, quitting a reliable job for hypothetical financial aid is how people end up homeless. The silence that followed was uncomfortable, weighted with the gulf between their experiences. I'm sorry, Nate said finally. You're right. I was trying to fix instead of understanding. I know, Teresa softened. You mean well. That's worth something. Just remember that my life has different math than yours, different risk calculations. Teach me, he squeezed her hand. I'm serious. Teach me how to see your world so I stop making an ass of myself. Despite everything, Teresa smiled. That could take a while. I've got time. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe this man, brilliant, wealthy, privileged, would maintain interest once the novelty wore off, once the challenge of winning her faded, once the reality of dating across class and race lines hit the social circles he moved through. But wanting to believe and believing were different things. Dinner, she agreed finally, but not somewhere expensive, somewhere normal. And you're not picking me up in a chauffeur-driven car. Deal, I'll text you details tomorrow. He paused. Actually, I don't have your number. They exchanged phones, entered contact information with the self-conscious care of teenagers navigating first crushes. When Teresa handed his phone back, their fingers lingered together, neither quite ready to break the connection. I should really go, she said without moving. You should, he agreed, not releasing her hand. Uncle Bob will worry. Probably. This is crazy. Completely. One more kiss? Teresa heard herself ask, then blushed at her own boldness. Nate's answer was to pull her close again, this kiss slower than the first, sweeter, flavored with jasmine and promise and the dangerous taste of hope. When they finally separated, both were breathing hard, flushed, and dazed. Go, Nate said roughly, before I forget every reason why you should. Teresa walked to the greenhouse door, looked back once to see him standing among the plants, backlit by security lights, looking lost and found simultaneously. She slipped out into the October night, wrapping her coat tight against the chill that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the fear settling in her bones. She'd just stepped off a cliff. She was falling, and she had no idea if there was ground below or just endless air. In the greenhouse, Nate stood motionless for a long time after she left, touching his lips where hers had been, tasting jasmine and terror and something that felt dangerously close to joy. He pulled out his phone, stared at her new contact entry, and typed a message he immediately deleted. Then another. Finally settled on simple truth. I'm in trouble. The good kind. Talk tomorrow? The response came faster than expected. Same. Yes. Good night, Nate, he added. Tusbi ala khair, Teresa. Good night in Arabic, the intimate form. Her reply made him smile. Wa enta min ahlu. And you as well. The formal response that was somehow also flirtation. Nate left the greenhouse and walked back to his suite in the main house, bypassing his mother's wing, not ready for questions he couldn't answer. In his room, he opened his laptop and started researching something he'd never considered before: how to date someone whose life had completely different rules than his own. How to bridge a gap that wasn't just about money, but about power, privilege, visibility, and risk. The internet had surprisingly little useful advice for billionaires who'd fallen for their mother's staff. He was in trouble. Deep, complicated, no-going-back trouble. And for the first time in 15 years, he didn't want to find a solution. He just wanted to see where falling took him. Teresa reached her apartment at 2 a.m. to find Bob waiting up, worry etched in every line of his face. "Tell me, Ephraim." "Didn't," he said without preamble. "I didn't." At his skeptical look, she clarified. "I didn't sleep with him. We just talked and kissed. A little. Maybe more than a little." "Baby girl." Bob pulled her into a hug. "You know this ends badly." "Probably," Teresa admitted into his shoulder. "But Uncle Bob? Just for tonight? Can I pretend it might not? Can I just have this one thing that feels good before reality ruins it?" "You can have anything you want," Bob said fiercely. "You deserve everything good in this world. I just don't want to watch you break when he realizes you're too real for his pretend life." "Maybe I'll break him first," Teresa said, trying for lightness. But lying in bed an hour later, staring at the ceiling of her studio apartment, she acknowledged the truth. People like her didn't break people like Nathaniel Montgomery. They just got broken trying. Her phone buzzed with a new message. "Can't sleep. Tell me something true." She smiled despite herself and typed, "I'm terrified you'll hurt me. I'm more terrified I'll let you." His response, "Fair. I'm terrified I'll disappoint you. I'm more terrified I'll prove your uncle right about men like me. What do we do with all this fear?" "No idea. Keep falling and hope we figure it out before we hit bottom?" "That's a terrible plan. Got a better one?" Teresa thought for a long moment, then typed, "No. Let's try yours. Dinner Tuesday, 7 p.m. I'll send details. Wear whatever makes you feel powerful." "Why Tuesday?" "Because if I see you Monday, I'll kiss you again, and I'm trying to be a gentleman about this." Teresa's laugh was soft and surprised. A gentleman who kisses the help in greenhouses at midnight, the help who challenges billionaires in ballrooms? We're both full of contradictions. Might as well embrace it. She set her phone down, closed her eyes, and tried not to think about how quickly this could all fall apart. Tried not to count the ways it was already impossible. Tried not to hear Bob's warning about rich men and women like them. Failed at all three. But sleep, when it finally came, was surprisingly sweet. She dreamed in Arabic and English of jasmine and possibility, of a man whose hands were gentle and whose eyes saw past her uniform to something he called terrifying. She'd take terrifying over invisible any day, even if it destroyed her in the end. Chapter 3. Monday morning arrived with the subtle cruelty of reality reasserting itself. Teresa's alarm screamed at 6 a.m., dragging her from dreams of jasmine-scented greenhouses into the harsh fluorescent truth of her studio apartment. She had 4 hours of online lectures, an international relations paper to revise, and the mounting awareness that she'd agreed to dinner with a billionaire while owning exactly 3 outfits that weren't her work uniform or sweatpants. The morning lectures blurred together, something about Cold War proxy conflicts and post-colonial feminist theory, while her mind kept returning to the greenhouse. To Nate's hands framing her face, to the way he'd kissed her like she was precious and terrifying in equal measure, to the impossible thing they were starting despite every practical reason to stop. Her phone buzzed during the gender studies discussion forum. Still thinking about Jasmine. And you. Especially you. Teresa bit her lip against a smile, typed back, "Pay attention to your work. Some of us have to earn our keep. My work is thinking about encryption protocols, much less interesting than thinking about you." Flatterer. Honest man, there's a difference. She shouldn't be doing this, shouldn't be flirting via text while trying to absorb lecture content she'd need for exams. Shouldn't be letting herself fall further into something that had disaster written all over it in neon letters. Her phone buzzed again, Dinner tomorrow. Rosa's on Mott Street, 7 p.m., small Italian place, family-owned, incredible food. No photographers, no social scene, just us. Teresa Googled it quickly. The restaurant was in Little Italy, the kind of place that had been there for 60 years and would be there for 60 more, where tourists rarely ventured and locals guarded like a secret. Reviews mentioned red sauce that tasted like someone's grandmother made it, and prices that wouldn't require a second mortgage. He'd listened. He'd found somewhere normal, somewhere she wouldn't feel like a display piece, somewhere they could just be two people sharing a meal. Perfect. See you there. Counting the hours, now go pay attention to your feminist theory. It's important. Despite herself, Teresa laughed. The man was impossible, infuriating, and somehow exactly what she hadn't known she needed. The rest of Monday passed in a haze of anticipation and dread. Bob called during her lunch break, his voice tight with concern. Vivian Montgomery called me into her office this morning. Teresa's stomach dropped. What did she say? She wanted to know if I was aware of your developing friendship with her son. Very delicate phrasing, very pointed questions. I told her you were a grown woman, and your personal life was your own business. He paused. She didn't like that answer. Uncle Bob, I'm sorry. I should have warned you. Don't apologize for living your life, baby girl. Just be careful. Women like Vivian Montgomery don't make suggestions. They make ultimatums. And right now, you're a problem she's figuring out how to solve. After they hung up, Teresa sat on her apartment floor and let herself feel the weight of what she'd started. This wasn't just about her and Nate anymore. It was about Bob's job, about the social order Vivian Montgomery had spent decades maintaining, about all the ways the world punished people for crossing lines they weren't supposed to see, let alone cross. She could still back out, could text Nate, cancel dinner, claim she'd been caught up in a moment of insanity and was now thinking clearly, could retreat to safety, to invisibility, to the life that made sense, even if it slowly suffocated her dreams. Her phone buzzed. My mother cornered me at breakfast, gave me the appropriate companion speech. I told her I was 38 and would date whoever I damn well pleased. She's furious. Fair warning. Teresa typed, she called my uncle in for questioning. We're causing problems. Good. Maybe it's time some problems got caused. Easy for you to say. You won't lose your job over this. The pause before his response was longer than usual. You're right. I'm sorry. Do you want to cancel tomorrow? Did she? Teresa stared at the question, at the easy out he was offering, at the chance to choose self-preservation over possibility. No, I want to have dinner with you, but I need you to understand what you're asking me to risk. Tell me, all of it. So she did. Over the next hour, through a series of texts that turned into a phone call that stretched into evening, Teresa explained the mathematics of her life, how losing this job meant losing health insurance that covered Bob's insulin, how staff housing allowances made the difference between paying rent and homelessness, how online classes cost less than traditional university but still required choosing between textbooks and groceries, how one impulsive decision could unravel 3 years of careful survival. Nate listened without interrupting, without offering solutions, without trying to fix what she wasn't asking him to repair. When she finished, his voice was quiet and serious. I hear you. I hear all of it. And I can't promise this won't blow up in both our faces. But I can promise that whatever happens between us, you and Bob won't lose your positions because of my mother's prejudice. I'll put that in writing if you need me to. I don't need you to rescue me. I'm not rescuing you. I'm removing an obstacle so we can figure out if this thing between us is real or just mutual insanity. He paused. Is that okay? Or is that still me trying to fix things I should just accept? Teresa smiled despite her anxiety. It's okay. Thank you for asking. Learning, he said softly, slowly, but learning. They talked for another hour about nothing and everything. Terrible movies, childhood memories, the specific way Arabic and English each had words the other language couldn't quite capture. The conversation was easy, natural, punctuated by laughter that made Teresa's chest ache with how much she wanted this to work. When they finally said goodnight, it was past 10, and Teresa had homework she hadn't touched and anxiety she couldn't shake. But she also had Tuesday to look forward to. And right now, that was enough. Tuesday arrived with October sunshine and unseasonable warmth. Teresa spent the morning in class, the afternoon helping Bob with some minor repairs around the estate, Viviane's pointed way of reminding them both of their place, and the evening staring at her closet in mounting panic. Wear whatever makes you feel powerful, Nate had said. Easy advice for someone whose closet probably cost more than her annual salary. She finally settled on dark jeans, ankle boots, and a deep burgundy sweater that her grandmother had bought her for her high school graduation. It was soft, well made, the kind of piece that transcended trends because it was simply beautiful. Paired with small gold hoops and her grandmother's delicate gold necklace, she felt like herself. Not trying to be something she wasn't, not apologizing for what she didn't have. Just Teresa, well-dressed and terrified and determined. Bob drove her to the train station, his face creased with worry he was trying to hide. "You look beautiful, baby girl." "Thank you." Teresa kissed his cheek. "Don't wait up. I don't know how long this will take." "Take all the time you need. Just text me so I know you're safe." "I will. Uncle Bob?" She caught his hand. "Thank you for not trying to talk me out of this." "Would it have worked if I tried?" "No." "Then I'm saving my breath for when you actually need me." His smile was sad and loving. "Go. Be young. Take a risk. I'll be here to catch you if it doesn't work out." The train ride into the city gave Teresa too much time to think, too much time to catalog all the ways this could go wrong, all the reasons she should turn around, all the evidence that women like her didn't end up with men like Nathaniel Montgomery except in romance novels and fairy tales. But she also remembered the greenhouse, the way he'd looked at her like she held answers to questions he'd been asking his whole life, the gentleness of his hands and the hunger in his kiss. The careful way he'd listened when she explained her life's mathematics, the texts and phone calls that felt more real than any relationship she'd ever attempted. Maybe this was crazy, but maybe crazy was better than the slow death of playing it safe. Rose's was tucked between a bakery and a butcher shop on a narrow street in Little Italy that tourists rarely found. The red and white checked curtains in the window and the hand-painted sign above the door spoke of decades in business, of family recipes and regular customers who'd been coming since childhood. Nate waited outside, leaning against the brick wall, looking nothing like a tech billionaire, and everything like a man nervous about a date. He wore dark jeans, a charcoal button-down with the sleeves rolled up, and no watch. She noticed the absence of the expensive timepiece he'd worn at the gala. When he saw her approaching, his face transformed with a smile so genuine it made her stumble slightly. "Hi," he said, like that one word contained multitudes. "Hi." Teresa stopped a foot away, suddenly shy. "You found a parking spot in Little Italy? It's more impressive than your business empire." "I took the subway." At her surprised look, he shrugged. "It's faster than dealing with Manhattan traffic, and I thought you might not want me showing up in a town car." "You took the subway," Teresa repeated, trying to process the image of Nathaniel Montgomery on public transportation. "I'm not completely out of touch," he said, his smile self-deprecating. "I grew up in Connecticut, not on Mars. I know how trains work." "I'm impressed." "Good. I'm trying to impress you." He offered his arm with old-fashioned courtesy. "Ready?" She took his arm, felt the solid warmth of him through his shirt, and let him lead her into Rose's. The interior was exactly as she'd imagined, small tables covered in those same red and white checked cloths, Italian opera playing softly, the smell of garlic and tomatoes and fresh bread making her mouth water. A woman in her 60s with kind eyes and steel-gray hair approached immediately. "Nathaniel, finally you bring someone worth meeting." She pulled him into a hug that was clearly familiar, then turned to Teresa with frank assessment. "And you. Too beautiful and too smart for this one, I can already tell." "Rosa, this is Teresa Hassan." Teresa, Rosa Marchetti, who's been feeding me since I was 25 and starving in my first startup office around the corner. He used to come in at midnight, order 3 meals, take 2 back to his office for his programmers. Rosa shook Teresa's hand warmly. Always polite, always generous with the tip, never made a fuss. Not like these tech boys now who think money makes them important. She led them to a corner table, away from the few other diners, and brought menus that Nate immediately set aside. "Do you trust me?" he asked Teresa. "That's a loaded question." "Fair. Do you trust my taste in Italian food?" "That I can probably risk." "Then let Rosa bring us whatever she thinks we should eat. It's never been wrong." Rosa beamed. "Smart boy. I'll take care of you both." When she bustled away, Teresa leaned forward. "You've been coming here for 13 years?" "Since I could barely afford their prices," Nate confirmed. "Rosa let me run a tab for the first year because she said I looked hungry and determined. When my second company sold and I could finally pay her back with interest, she refused, said watching me succeed was payment enough." "You're full of surprises," Teresa said softly. "The greenhouse, the subway, the grandmother Italian restaurant. You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone more polished, more performance, more interested in being seen at the right places with the right people." "That's the version my mother tried to create." Nate's smile was rueful. "This is the version I am when I'm not performing for the social register. Welcome to the real me. He's less impressive but more honest. I like him better already." Rosa returned with wine. A Chianti, she promised, was perfect for fall evenings and new romance, and they fell into conversation that flowed as naturally as it had in the greenhouse. But here, in the warm light of the restaurant, with other people around and the weight of the real world present, something shifted. This wasn't a stolen midnight moment. This was a choice they were both making in daylight, with full awareness of what they were starting. The food came in waves: antipasto, then fresh mozzarella with tomatoes and basil, then pasta that made Teresa close her eyes in appreciation, then chicken marsala that Rosa insisted they share, then tiramisu that was better than any dessert had a right to be. They ate and talked, switching between English and Arabic without conscious thought, hands occasionally brushing when reaching for bread or wine, the attraction that had ignited in the greenhouse burning steadier now, banked but building. "Tell me about your first business," Teresa said over dessert. "The one that failed." Nate raised his eyebrows. "What makes you think one failed?" "Because nobody successful got there without failure, and you strike me as someone who learned more from falling than flying." "Perceptive." He leaned back, considering. "I started 3 companies before the encryption software. First was a social networking platform for freelancers. Good idea, terrible execution, ran out of funding in 8 months. Lost everything, including the girlfriend who'd bankrolled part of it." "That was a fun conversation." "How old were you?" 23. Young enough to think confidence could substitute for experience. Old enough to know better. He smiled without humor. "The failure nearly destroyed me. I'd been so sure, so arrogant. Spent 6 months sleeping on a friend's couch, doing contract coding work to pay off debts, wondering if I had just proven my mother right that I should have stayed in the family investment business. But you didn't." "But I didn't. Because failure taught me something success never could. How to listen. How to actually hear what users needed instead of assuming I knew better. How to build teams instead of trying to control everything. How to ask for help without seeing it as weakness." He met her eyes. "The encryption software succeeded because I'd learned how to fail properly first." "That's a good lesson," Teresa said quietly. "You already know it," Nate observed. "Your whole life has been about turning obstacles into education. You're living a masterclass in resilience. Don't romanticize my struggle." "I'm not. I'm recognizing it." He reached across the table, hesitated, then took her hand when she didn't pull away. "You could have given up 100 times, stayed in a minimum wage job, abandoned the dream of finishing your degree, accepted that online classes were as far as you'd get. But you're still fighting. That's not romantic. That's fierce." Teresa's throat tightened. "I don't feel fierce. I feel tired." "You can be both." His thumb traced circles on her palm, the gesture becoming familiar. "Fierceness isn't about never getting tired. It's about keeping going even when you're exhausted." They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked across the table, while Rosa bustled around other diners and Italian opera swelled from the speakers. This moment, this ordinary, extraordinary moment, felt suspended outside time. Just 2 people getting to know each other, building something fragile and potentially beautiful. Dance with me, Nate said suddenly. There's no dance floor. Doesn't matter. He stood, pulled her gently to her feet, guided her to the small empty space near their table. Just follow me. He pulled her close, one hand on her waist, the other still holding hers, and they swayed to music that wasn't meant for dancing. Other diners watched with indulgent smiles. Rosa caught Teresa's eye and winked, and Teresa let herself relax into Nate's arms, let herself feel the solid warmth of him, let herself believe for just this moment that this could work. I'm scared, she admitted against his shoulder. Me too. His arms tightened around her. Terrified, actually. Of what? That I'll hurt you, that I won't be enough, that you'll realize I'm just another privileged guy playing at being deep. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. That this is the most real thing I've felt in 15 years, and I'll somehow destroy it. I'm scared you'll get bored, Teresa said honestly, that the challenge of winning me will wear off and you'll realize I'm just a woman with student debt and a studio apartment and dreams that probably won't come true. What if I told you that's exactly who I want? Not the fantasy, not the potential project. Just you, exactly as you are, dreams and debt and all. I'd say you don't know me well enough to make that claim. Then let me know you better. Nate's voice was urgent now, intense. That's all I'm asking. Time, honesty, a chance to prove this isn't a rich guy's whim. The music shifted to something slower, sadder. They kept swaying, bodies aligned, something building between them that was equal parts desire and genuine connection. Okay, Teresa whispered. Time, honesty, a real chance. Thank you. Nate's forehead dropped to rest against hers. Thank you for taking a risk on me. Thank you for seeing me. They stayed like that, foreheads touching, breath mingling, while the restaurant continued around them and the world outside ceased to matter. When the song ended, they returned to their table to find Rosa had cleared their dishes and left a plate of chocolates with a note. Young love deserves sweetness. On the house. I like her, Teresa said, popping a chocolate in her mouth. She likes you, which means more than you might think. Rosa's excellent at reading people. Nate glanced at his watch, then winced. It's nearly 11. I don't want this to end, but I also don't want to be the asshole who keeps you out so late you're exhausted tomorrow. I don't have class until noon tomorrow. The words were out before Teresa could second-guess them, an invitation hanging in the air between them. Nate's eyes darkened. Teresa. I'm not suggesting what you think I'm suggesting, she interrupted quickly. I'm not ready to say goodnight yet. Can we walk? Just walk and talk? Relief and something like disappointment crossed his face. Yes, absolutely. Let me pay and we'll walk. He settled the bill over Rosa's protests that they were family, and family didn't pay, compromised by leaving a tip that was probably triple the cost of the meal, and they stepped out into the October night that had turned cool and sharp. They walked without destination, hands eventually finding each other, fingers intertwining like it was the most natural thing in the world. Little Italy gave way to Soho, the streets busier here, galleries still open, people spilling out of bars and restaurants. Nobody looked twice at them, just another couple on a date in a city full of couples on dates. Tell me something you've never told anyone, Nate said as they paused to look in a gallery window at abstract paintings neither of them understood. That's a dangerous request. I'll trade you. I tell you something. You tell me something. Teresa considered. Okay, you first. Nate was quiet for a long moment, staring at the paintings without seeing them. I haven't told anyone that sometimes I wish my father was alive to see my success. Not because I want to prove anything to him, he never doubted me, but because he's the only person who would have understood what it cost, the isolation, the way wealth changes every relationship, the loneliness of having everything except genuine connection. He turned to look at her. Your turn. Teresa's heart ached for the vulnerability in his voice. I've never told anyone that sometimes I resent my grandmother. Not for dying, I'd never resent that. But for bringing me to America, for making me believe education and dreams were possible, then leaving me to figure out how to achieve them in a system designed to keep people like me struggling. I love her. I miss her every day, and I'm so angry at her for giving me hope without resources. That's not ungrateful, Nate said softly. That's honest. It feels ungrateful. Feelings aren't always fair. He squeezed her hand. Thank you for trusting me with that. They walked on, through Soho into the village, past Washington Square Park where students and artists and chess players gathered even on a Tuesday night. The city thrummed around them, alive and indifferent, a million stories happening simultaneously. Near the arch, Nate pulled her to a stop. Can I kiss you? Here, where people can see. Why are you asking permission? Because last time was midnight in a greenhouse where nobody could witness it. This is different. This is public. This is us choosing to be visible together. Teresa understood what he was really asking. In the greenhouse, they could pretend it was just attraction, just stolen moments. Here, under streetlights with witnesses, it became real. It became something they were claiming, consequences and all. Yes, she said simply. Kiss me. He did, pulling her close right there under the Washington Square arch, kissing her with a sweet intensity that made her forget the cold and the curious glances from passers-by. His hands framed her face like she was precious, his lips soft and sure, his body warm against hers in the October chill. When they broke apart, both breathless, Teresa saw someone with a camera phone quickly tucking it away. Her stomach dropped. Someone just took our picture. Nate followed her gaze, saw the person disappearing into the crowd. His jaw tightened, but he didn't let go of her. It'll be online by morning, probably. Are you okay with that? Was she? Once their picture hit social media or gossip sites, there'd be no going back to invisible. People would have opinions. Vivian would have opinions. Bob would worry more. The world would see her as either a gold digger or a curiosity, another black woman caught in the orbit of white wealth, subject to all the assumptions and stereotypes that came with that territory. But she was also tired of hiding, tired of making herself small, tired of letting other people's judgments dictate her choices. I'm okay with it, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Are you? Are you kidding? A picture of me kissing the most beautiful, brilliant woman I've ever met? I should hire that photographer. His smile was fierce and proud. Let them look. Let them talk. You're worth every word. You say that now. I'll say it when the articles drop too, Nate interrupted, and when my mother calls in outrage, and when society friends start whispering. I'll say it every day until you believe it. Teresa studied his face, searching for doubt or hesitation, found only determination and something that looked dangerously close to devotion. Take me home, she said quietly. Not to your place, to mine. I want you to see how I really live before you make promises you might not want to keep. Nate hailed a cab without argument, gave the driver her address, and held her hand throughout the ride across town to her neighborhood. She watched his face as they drove through areas that got progressively less gentrified, less glossy, more real. Saw him taking it in without judgment, just observation, learning the geography of her life. Her building was a walk-up in a neighborhood that was neither dangerous nor desirable, just working-class ordinary. The lobby smelled like cooking spices and industrial cleaner. The elevator was broken as usual. They climbed 4 flights, Teresa acutely aware of peeling paint and flickering hallway lights, and all the ways her world differed from his. Here, she unlocked her door, suddenly nervous. Studio apartment, 400 square feet, rent-controlled thanks to a cousin of Bob's who's on the lease. It's not much. It's yours, Nate said, stepping inside. That makes it important. He took in her space with quiet attention. The Murphy bed that pulled down from the wall, the 2-burner hot plate that served as her kitchen, the small desk where her laptop sat surrounded by textbooks and papers, the photos of her grandmother on the walls, her mother and father smiling in the one picture she had from before the accident, the bookshelf made from concrete blocks and plywood, packed with library books and notebooks and dreams. This is where you do all your schoolwork? He asked, touching the desk. And where I eat, work on my laptop, basically live when the bed's up. Teresa wrapped her arms around herself. I know it's not. Stop! Nate turned to face her. Stop apologizing for your life. This apartment is clean, organized, full of books and evidence of someone working incredibly hard to build a future. There's nothing here to be ashamed of. You live in a penthouse. I live in 12,000 square feet of emptiness that an interior designer filled with furniture I didn't choose. You live in 400 square feet that's completely, authentically yours. Yours is better. Despite her anxiety, Teresa smiled. You're trying to make me feel better. I'm telling you what I see. He moved closer, not touching but present. I see a woman who's built a life out of scraps and dignity, who studies international relations while working full-time, who speaks 2 languages and navigates 2 worlds and somehow maintains grace under pressure that would break most people. This apartment isn't a limitation, it's evidence of your strength. Teresa's eyes stung with sudden tears. You're very good at saying the right thing. I'm saying what's true. There's a difference. He reached up, gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. What do you need right now? Really need? She thought about it, about desire and connection and the dangerous vulnerability of having him in her space, about how easy it would be to pull him to her bed, to lose herself in physical connection, to stop thinking about all the complications. But that's not what she needed. Not yet. Hold me, she asked. Just hold me for a while? No expectations, no pressure, just be here with me? Yes. Nate pulled her close, wrapped her in his arms, rested his chin on top of her head. As long as you want. They stood in her tiny apartment, swaying slightly, while traffic sounds drifted through the window and the building settled around them. Teresa breathed in his scent, felt the steady beat of his heart, let herself relax into the embrace. This is nice, she murmured. It is. His arms tightened. Thank you for letting me see your world. Thank you for not running away from it. Teresa. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. I need you to understand something. I'm not slumming. I'm not playing at poverty tourism. This is the most real thing in my life right now. Your apartment, your struggles, your dreams, they're not obstacles to overcome. They're part of who you are, and I'm trying very hard not to fall completely in love with who you are. Her breath caught. Nate, I know it's too soon to say that, he continued quickly. I know we've known each other less than a week, but I need you to understand where my head is, what my intentions are, so you're not wondering if this is a game. What if I'm falling too? The words escaped before caution could stop them. What if I'm terrified because this feels too big, too fast, too impossible? Then we're both terrified together. His smile was crooked, vulnerable. Maybe that's okay? Maybe we just acknowledge this is insane and do it anyway? That's still a terrible plan. Got a better one? Teresa laughed through her tears, then pulled his face down to kiss him. This kiss was different from the others, less desperate, more claiming. A conscious choice to dive deeper into whatever this was becoming. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Nate rested his forehead against hers. I should go, he said without moving, before I forget every good intention. You should, she agreed, also not moving. Walk me to the door. They moved the 5 feet to her apartment door, still holding each other, reluctant to let go. At the threshold, Nate kissed her once more, soft and promising. Text me when you wake up tomorrow, he said. I want to know you're real. You text me first. I want to know you don't regret this in daylight. Deal. He stepped into the hallway, turned back. Teresa? Tonight was perfect. All of it. Thank you. She watched him descend the stairs, listened to his footsteps fade, then closed her door and leaned against it. Her phone buzzed immediately. Already missing you. Is that pathetic? She smiled, typed back, very. But I feel the same. Good. Sleep well, dream of Jasmine, dream of Italian restaurants and terrible plans that might work. My favorite kind of plans. Good night, Habibti. The Arabic endearment, my love, my darling, made her chest ache with hope and fear in equal measure. She pulled down her Murphy bed, changed into pajamas, and lay staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening. Somewhere across town, in a penthouse that suddenly felt even emptier than usual, Nate did the same. Lying in a bed that cost more than Teresa's annual rent, staring at a ceiling that was too far away to feel real, wondering how someone he'd known less than a week had already become essential. His phone buzzed. Still awake? Can't sleep. Too much thinking. Me too. Tell me something that will help. Nate thought for a moment, then typed, My father used to say that the best things in life were the ones that scared you. Because fear meant you cared about the outcome. So if I'm terrified right now, it means what we're building matters. Does that help? Yes. Your father sounds wise. He was. I wish he'd met you. He would have liked you. I wish my grandmother had met you. She would have interrogated you in Arabic to make sure your intentions were honorable. Were they honorable enough? She would have made you prove it, probably with poetry and promises and some kind of test involving cooking. I can't cook. Would I have failed? Probably. But she would have appreciated the attempt. They texted for another hour, silly and sweet, the intimacy of late-night conversation when defenses were down and truth came easier. Finally, Teresa's responses slowed, exhaustion winning. Falling asleep. Thank you for tonight. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Sleep well, Teresa. Tomorrow we deal with reality. Tonight was perfect. She fell asleep with her phone still in her hand, a smile on her face, and hope blooming dangerous and bright in her chest. Tomorrow would bring consequences. The photo from Washington Square would surface. Vivian would unleash her fury. The world would have opinions about a billionaire and a maid who dared to reach across the carefully maintained boundaries of class and race. But tonight had been perfect. And sometimes perfect was enough to make you brave enough to face whatever came next. Chapter 4. Wednesday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Teresa's phone started buzzing at 7 a.m., texts from numbers she didn't recognize, notifications from social media accounts she rarely checked, and finally, Bob's name flashing urgent across her screen. Baby girl, have you seen it? Seen what? Teresa was still groggy, reaching for her phone with sleep-clumsy fingers. The picture, it's everywhere. TMZ, page 6, every gossip site between here and California. Mystery woman captures tech billionaire's heart. They're calling you the mystery woman. Teresa's stomach plummeted. She opened her browser with shaking hands, and there it was. Her and Nate under the Washington Square arch, his hands framing her face, the kiss captured in perfect clarity. The headline screamed, Nathaniel Montgomery's secret romance, who is the stunning stranger? The articles were, surprisingly, not terrible. Some speculated she was a foreign dignitary's daughter. Others guessed she was a UN translator he'd met through business. A few noted she was refreshingly normal-looking compared to his usual socialite dates, which was both compliment and insult wrapped together. But nowhere did they identify her as staff at his family's estate. Yet. Uncle Bob, I'm okay. We knew this might happen. Did you? Because Vivian Montgomery is losing her mind. She called me at 6:30 this morning, demanding to know if I knew where you were last night, if I'd allowed this to happen, if I understood the position I'd put the family in. His voice cracked slightly. Baby girl, she's talking about terminating my employment. Ice flooded Teresa's veins. She can't do that. You've done nothing wrong. She doesn't need a reason beyond family liability. That's what she called us, a liability. Bob's exhaustion was audible. I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty. I'm telling you because you need to know what you're dealing with. This isn't just about you and Nathaniel anymore. After they hung up, Teresa sat on her Murphy bed and tried to breathe through the panic. She'd known there would be consequences. She'd chosen visibility, chosen to take the risk. But hearing that Bob's 30-year career was threatened because of her choices made bile rise in her throat. Her phone buzzed with Nate's name. Have you seen the articles? Are you okay? I've seen them. I'm fine. My uncle's not. Your mother threatened to fire him. What? This morning. Called him at 6:30 to blame him for my inappropriate behavior. Nate, you have to fix this. Whatever happens with us, Bob can't lose his job because I kissed you. I'm handling it. Stay there. I'm coming to you. No. Your mother probably has people watching my building by now. Meet me at the Hungarian pastry shop near Columbia in an hour. Okay. Teresa, I'm sorry. I knew there'd be pushback, but I didn't think she'd go after Bob. Neither did I. See you in an hour. Teresa showered quickly, dressed in jeans and a sweater, and tried to prepare herself for whatever came next. The subway ride to the Upper West Side was surreal. She kept expecting people to recognize her from the photo, to point and whisper. But New York was New York. Nobody cared about one woman on the train, even if her face was plastered across gossip sites. The Hungarian pastry shop was exactly what she needed. Old-world charm, strong coffee, pastries that smelled like comfort, and enough Columbia students studying to provide cover. She ordered coffee and found a table in the back, trying to organize her thoughts. Nate arrived 10 minutes later, looking haggard. He'd clearly thrown on the first clothes he found: jeans, a Columbia hoodie from his student days, sneakers, and his hair was disheveled in a way that suggested frustrated running of hands through it rather than careful styling. He spotted her, navigated through the tables, and dropped into the chair across from her with the weight of someone who hadn't slept. "I talked to my mother," he said without preamble. "Bob keeps his job. That's non-negotiable. I told her if she fires him over this, I'll pull all my financial support for her charities and social causes. She's backed down. For now." Relief flooded Teresa's chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me for basic decency." Nate's voice was tight with anger. "I should have anticipated this, should have protected you both better. You can't control your mother. I can set boundaries, which I should have done years ago." He scrubbed his face with both hands. "She showed up at my penthouse at 6 this morning, let herself in with the spare key I foolishly gave her, woke me up with a lecture about family reputation, appropriate companions, and how I was throwing away my social standing for a—" He stopped abruptly. "For a what?" Teresa's voice was dangerously quiet. "Say it." "I won't repeat her words. They don't deserve air." Nate's gray eyes were fierce. "But I told her that my relationship with you was none of her business, that I was an adult who'd built my own fortune and didn't need her approval for my personal life, that if she couldn't be civil about the woman I was dating, she'd see a lot less of me." "How did that go?" "About as well as you'd imagine. Tears, accusations of ingratitude, threats to cut me off from family events." His smile was bitter. "I reminded her I'm 38 and financially independent. She reminded me I'm still her son and owe her respect. We're at an impasse." Teresa wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, trying to absorb everything. "Nate, maybe we should slow down. Let things cool off. This is tearing apart your family." "My family was already torn apart," he interrupted. "It's just been hidden behind charity galas and polite facades. You didn't break anything. You just revealed the cracks that were always there." "That's very philosophical, but it doesn't change the reality that your mother hates me and threatened my uncle's livelihood because you kissed me in public. Which is exactly why I'm not backing down." Nate leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. "Don't you see? If we let her bully us into hiding, into apologizing for caring about each other, we're validating everything wrong with her worldview. We're saying that class and race and social standing matter more than genuine connection." "They do matter," Teresa said flatly. "Maybe they shouldn't, but they do. Pretending otherwise is privilege, Nate. You can choose to ignore social consequences because you have money and power. I can't. My uncle can't. People like us pay prices people like you never see." The truth sat heavy between them. Nate's face crumpled slightly, and Teresa saw him truly grappling with what she'd said. "You're right," he said finally. "I'm thinking like someone who's never had to worry about basic security, who's never faced discrimination or had opportunities denied because of skin color or bank account." He reached across the table, stopped just short of touching her hand. "Tell me how to do better, not theoretically, practically. What do you need from me right now?" Teresa considered. What did she need? Safety for Bob, space to think, assurance that Nate understood the stakes, and honest conversation about whether this relationship could survive in the real world beyond romantic dinners and midnight greenhouses. "I need you to understand that every public moment together puts my life under a microscope. People will have opinions about me that have nothing to do with who I am and everything to do with what I represent. Some will call me a gold digger. Others will see me as a diversity prop. Very few will just see me as Teresa." "I see you as Teresa." "I know, but you're one person. The world is millions." She finally let him take her hand. "I need you to be patient." to let me set the pace, to understand that some days I'll wake up and this will feel like a beautiful dream, and other days I'll wake up convinced it's a nightmare that will destroy everything I've built. I can do that. Nate's grip tightened on her hand. What else? I need you to keep your promises about Bob. No matter what happens with us, he stays protected. Done. Already in writing with my attorney. Bob has a 5-year contract with the estate, generous salary, full benefits. My mother can't touch it. Teresa's eyes stung. You did that already? This morning, before I came here. Your uncle's security isn't conditional on our relationship. He paused. What else? I need you to not try to fix everything, not swoop in with money or connections or solutions to problems I need to solve myself. I need you to trust that I'm capable even when things are hard. That one's harder, Nate admitted. My instinct is to solve problems. But I hear you. I'll try to ask before acting. Trying is enough. Teresa squeezed his hand. And Nate, I need you to be honest with me about when this gets too hard, when the complications outweigh the connection. I'd rather you tell me it's not working than have you stay out of guilt or stubbornness. Same goes for you, he said softly. If this becomes too much, if the cost is too high, tell me. I'd rather lose you honestly than keep you miserably. They sat in the Hungarian pastry shop, hands linked across a scarred wooden table, and made their promises. Not the romantic kind that featured in movies, the real kind that acknowledged difficulty and committed anyway. So, what now? Teresa asked finally. Now I go talk to Tariq, Nate said. My business partner from Dubai. He's in town for meetings this week and he's been wanting to meet you. Meet me? Why? Because I've been talking about you nonstop since the gala, and he's curious about the woman who's got me acting like a teenager with his first crush. His words, not mine. Nate smiled. Also because he runs a foundation that funds education for displaced persons and refugees, he might have opportunities relevant to your interests. Nate, I'm not offering to fix anything, he interrupted gently. I'm introducing you to someone in your field who makes decisions about grants and programs. What you do with that introduction is entirely up to you. Is that okay? Teresa considered. It was a connection, not charity. An introduction, not a solution imposed on her. The kind of thing that happened in professional networks all the time, except she'd never had access to those networks. Okay, she agreed. When? Tonight? Dinner at his hotel? Casual, just the 3 of us. He's staying at the Plaza, but we can eat somewhere less pretentious if you'd prefer. The Plaza is fine. Teresa took a deep breath. I can handle fancy hotels. I know you can handle anything. Nate stood, pulled her up with him. Walk with me? I have meetings all afternoon, but I'm not ready to let you go yet. They walked through the Columbia campus, past students rushing to classes, past the library where Teresa had once attended a public lecture on Middle Eastern politics, past the life she'd dreamed of having if money hadn't been an obstacle. Nate seemed to sense her thoughts. You'll be a student here someday, he said quietly, or NYU, or wherever you choose. You'll finish your degree and then your master's, and probably your PhD, because I have a feeling you won't stop until you've learned everything. That's a lot of certainty about someone's future you have no control over. I have certainty about your determination. The rest is just logistics. He pulled her into the shadow of a building, away from foot traffic, and kissed her softly. I have to go. Text me your address again, and I'll send a car at 6:30. I can take the subway. I know you can. But I'd like to send a car. Is that okay? Teresa smiled at his careful asking. That's okay. Thank you. She watched him walk away, pulling out his phone probably to handle the 17 crises waiting for his attention, and marveled at how her life had transformed in less than a week. Last Tuesday, she'd been invisible staff at a charity gala. Today, she was the woman in the viral photo, meeting a billionaire's business partners, navigating social complications she'd only read about in novels. Her phone buzzed with a text from Bob. Vivian just confirmed my contract is secure. What did you do? I didn't do anything. Nate did. He's protecting you. I don't like owing these people, baby girl. You don't owe them. Nate's keeping promises he made to me. That's different, if you say so. Be careful tonight. Rich men's friends are still rich men. They play games we don't understand. I'll be careful. Love you. Love you too. Text me when you're home safe. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Teresa attended her online gender studies seminar, contributed to the discussion on intersectionality and systemic oppression, with perhaps more passion than usual, given her current circumstances, then spent 2 hours trying to figure out what to wear to dinner at the plaza. She finally settled on the same burgundy sweater from last night, paired with black pants and her one pair of heels that didn't look cheap. Her grandmother's necklace for luck. Subtle makeup because she refused to try too hard. This was who she was. Take it or leave it. The car arrived exactly at 6:30. Not a limo, thank God, just a sleek black sedan with a professional driver who treated her with quiet courtesy. The ride to the plaza was mercifully short, and then she was being ushered through the ornate lobby to a private dining room where Nate and another man waited. Tariq al-Mansour was in his mid-40s, wearing an immaculate gray suit, his dark hair silvering at the temples. He had the kind of presence that came from earned authority rather than inherited wealth. Warm eyes, easy smile, the body language of someone comfortable in his skin. "Teresa Hassan," he said, rising to greet her with a handshake and the Arabic greeting. "Assalamu alaikum. Nathaniel has told me so much about you. I feel I already know you." "Wa alaikum salam," she responded, returning his smile. "I hope he told you good things." "He told me you challenge him, which is the best thing anyone can do for this stubborn American." Tariq's grin was mischievous. "Please, sit. Tell me about yourself. Nathaniel says you studied in Khartoum." The dinner that followed was nothing like Teresa expected. She'd braced for subtle interrogation, for assessment disguised as friendly conversation, for the feeling of being tested. Instead, Tariq asked genuine questions about her grandmother, her experience of displacement, her educational goals. He shared his own story. Palestinian family, educated in London, built his wealth in tech before turning to philanthropy because making money is easy, making a difference is hard. "Nathaniel mentioned you're interested in conflict resolution and humanitarian work," Tariq said over the main course. "What specifically draws you to that field?" Teresa set down her fork, organizing her thoughts. "I've lived in two worlds, Sudan and America. I've seen how misunderstanding escalates into conflict, how lack of communication creates suffering. Language is supposed to be a bridge, but too often it becomes a weapon. I want to be part of solutions that honor dignity, that see people as people rather than problems to solve." "Well said," Tariq exchanged a glance with Nate. "Our foundation is expanding our education program. We're looking for someone to help develop curriculum for displaced youth that honors their cultural backgrounds while preparing them for global citizenship. It's a contract position, 6 months initially, with possibility of extension, based in New York with some international travel. It pays enough to live on while finishing your degree." Teresa's heart stopped. "Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you an interview," Tariq corrected gently. "But yes, based on this conversation and what Nathaniel has shared about your background, you'd be an ideal candidate, if you're interested." She looked at Nate, who'd been quiet during this exchange. His face was carefully neutral, giving her space to decide without pressure. "Did you orchestrate this?" she asked him directly. "Tariq mentioned the position last week," Nate said honestly. "I mentioned you might be qualified. But the job is real, the interview is real, and whether you get it has nothing to do with me. Tariq doesn't do anyone favors when it comes to his foundation's work. It matters too much." "It's true," Tariq confirmed. "I've turned down the children of presidents and CEOs for positions when they weren't qualified. My foundation's reputation depends on hiring the best people, not the best connected people." Teresa's mind raced. 6 months of contract work, money to finish her degree, experience in her actual field instead of service work, international travel, everything she'd dreamed of, offered on a silver platter because she'd kissed a billionaire under a Washington Square arch. "I'm interested," she said slowly, "but I need to be honest about something. I'm scared that if things don't work out between Nate and me, this opportunity disappears. I'm scared I'm getting this because of who I'm dating, not what I can actually do." "That's a fair concern," Tariq said, his respect for her honesty clear in his face. "Let me address it directly. Nathaniel and I have been business partners for 8 years. In that time, he's never asked me to hire anyone. He's never leveraged our friendship for personal gain. The fact that he mentioned you tells me two things. First, that he thinks you're genuinely qualified, and second, that he cares enough about you to risk my annoyance if he's wrong." He smiled. "The interview process will be thorough. If you're not qualified, you won't get the job regardless of your relationship with Nathaniel. And if you do get the job, the contract includes a clause that your employment is independent of any personal relationships." Does that help? It did, more than Teresa could articulate. "Yes, thank you for being direct." "I appreciate directness," Tariq said. "It's rare in my world. Now, tell me about your thesis work. Nathaniel said you're writing about linguistic power dynamics in diplomacy?" The rest of the dinner was professional conversation that Teresa discovered she was good at. She discussed her academic work, her thoughts on current humanitarian crises, her ideas about education as violence prevention. Tariq asked probing questions that made her think harder, challenged her assumptions, treated her like a colleague rather than a charity case. By the time dessert arrived, Teresa felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope, real, grounded hope based on her abilities rather than impossible dreams. "The interview will be next week," Tariq said as they finished coffee. "My deputy director will contact you with details. Come prepared to discuss your vision for culturally responsive education programs. And Teresa, thank you for indulging an old friend's curiosity about the woman who's captured Nathaniel's attention. I can see why he speaks of you so highly." After Tariq excused himself to handle international business calls, Nate walked Teresa through the plaza's ornate lobby toward the waiting car. "Thank you," she said when they reached the street. "For the introduction, not the orchestration." "You're welcome, and for the record, I didn't orchestrate anything. I just opened a door. You're the one who walked through it like you belonged there." His smile was proud. "Because you do belong there. You belong in rooms where decisions get made, where your intelligence and perspective matter." "I'm still scared this is a dream that will evaporate when we hit complications." "Then we'll deal with complications when they come." Nate pulled her close, right there on Fifth Avenue with doormen and tourists watching. "But Teresa, what we're building, it's not a dream. It's work. Hard, messy, complicated work. And I'm willing to do that work if you are." She looked up at him, this man who'd been a stranger 10 days ago and was now somehow essential. "I'm willing, terrified, but willing. Best kind of willing." He kissed her softly, mindful of their audience. "Go home. Prepare for your interview. Text me when you're safe. And Teresa, I'm proud of you. For tonight, for your courage, for being exactly who you are without apology." The car ride home gave Teresa time to process everything. A week ago, she'd been invisible. Today, she'd had dinner at the plaza, been offered an interview for her dream job, and navigated her first business dinner in the world she'd always wanted to join. Because of Nate. But also because of herself, because when the door opened, she'd walked through it with confidence, because she'd been honest about her concerns instead of grateful and silent, because she'd insisted on being seen as qualified rather than connected. Her phone buzzed. "How do you feel?" She typed back, scared, excited, like my life is changing too fast to process. "Good changes? Maybe, probably. Ask me again after the interview." "Fair. Get some sleep. Dream of possibility instead of fear. That's very poetic for a tech billionaire. You bring out my hidden depths. Also, I've been reading Rumi, trying to impress you with my cultural literacy." Teresa laughed out loud in the back of the car. "Is it working? You tell me. Let yourself be silently drawn by the strange pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray." "Okay, that's actually beautiful. But also terrifying advice when what I love is you and this whole situation is impossible. Then let's be impossible together. Good night, Habibti. Good night, Nate." At home, Bob was waiting with tea and worry. "How'd it go?" "I have an interview," Teresa said, still slightly dazed. "A real interview for a real job in humanitarian education. 6-month contract that could extend. It's what I've been dreaming about. Because of him. Because of an introduction he made. But I still have to interview. I still have to prove I'm qualified." He opened a door. "I have to walk through it on my own merit." Bob studied her face. "You're glowing, baby girl. Haven't seen you look like this since before your grandmother passed." "Happy, actually happy." "I'm terrified," Teresa admitted, But yes, also happy. Is that stupid? No, Bob pulled her into a hug. That's brave. Keep being brave. I'll be here to catch you either way. That night, Teresa lay in her Murphy bed and let herself feel everything. Fear and hope, excitement and dread, the weight of possibility and the terror of losing it all. She pulled out her laptop and started preparing for the interview, making notes about culturally responsive education, about her vision for honoring displaced students' backgrounds while preparing them for their futures. At 2 a.m., she was still working when her phone buzzed. Still awake? Can't sleep. Too much. Thinking. About the interview? About everything. The interview. Us. How my life was simple 10 days ago and now it's complicated in ways I can't predict. Do you regret it? The complications? Teresa thought about it honestly. About the photo, the gossip, Vivian's threats, the uncertainty. About the way Nate looked at her like she held answers to questions he'd been asking his whole life. About dinner conversations that mattered and kisses that tasted like jasmine and possibility. No, I don't regret it. I'm terrified and overwhelmed and sometimes convinced this will end badly. But I don't regret taking the risk. Good. Because I'm in love with you and it's too late to take it back. Teresa's breath caught. She stared at the words on her screen, rereading them until they blurred. He loved her. This brilliant, complicated, privileged man who could have anyone loved her. Teresa Hassan, with her studio apartment and student debt and unfinished dreams. That's a big statement for 2 a.m. I know. I've been trying not to say it. Trying to be appropriate, give you space, not pressure you. But sitting here at 2 a.m., preparing for meetings I don't care about while thinking about you, I realized I'm done pretending this is casual or careful. I love you. You don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know. Teresa's hands trembled as she typed, I love you too. God help me, I do. And it's the most terrifying thing I've ever admitted. Why terrifying? Because love makes the stakes real. Because now when this falls apart, it won't just hurt. It'll break me. What if it doesn't fall apart? What if we're the exception to every rule? People like me don't get exceptions. Maybe you do now. Maybe we both do. They texted until nearly 4 a.m., declarations and fears and hopes tangled together in the intimate darkness of late-night honesty. When Teresa finally fell asleep, her phone was still clutched in her hand, Nate's last message glowing on the screen. Sleep now, love. Tomorrow we build our impossible future together. And for the first time since her grandmother died, Teresa let herself believe that impossible might just be possible after all. Chapter 5. The week following Tariq's dinner passed in a blur of contradictions. Teresa prepared obsessively for her interview, researching education models for displaced populations, drafting curriculum proposals, and trying to ignore the voice in her head that whispered she wasn't qualified enough, wasn't educated enough, wasn't enough, period. Nate texted constantly. Encouragement, articles relevant to her research, random observations about his day that made her smile. They managed one more dinner, this time at a quiet Thai restaurant in Queens where nobody recognized them and they could just be two people falling deeper into something neither fully understood. The interview happened on a rainy Thursday afternoon in Tariq's foundation offices in Midtown. His deputy director, a formidable woman named Dr. Sarah Doon, who'd spent 20 years with Doctors Without Borders, put Teresa through 3 hours of rigorous questioning. She wanted specifics, curriculum design, trauma-informed pedagogy, cultural competency frameworks, assessment strategies. Teresa held her own. She drew on her grandmother's teachings, her own experience of displacement, her academic knowledge from online courses. She was honest about what she didn't know and confident about what she did. When Dr. Doon asked why she wanted this position, Teresa looked her in the eye and said, "Because I understand what it means to lose your world and have to rebuild it in a language that doesn't have words for your grief. I want to help other people navigate that journey with dignity." Dr. Doon had smiled then, small but real. "We'll be in touch by Monday." Now it was Friday night, and Nate had invited Teresa to his penthouse for the first time. She stood in front of his building on the Upper West Side, staring up at the sleek glass tower, and tried to calm her racing heart. "You okay, miss?" The doorman's voice was kind. "Yes, thank you. I'm here to see Nathaniel Montgomery." "Ms. Hassan, Mr. Montgomery is expecting you. Top floor." Of course he'd told the doorman her name. Of course he'd prepared the way. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt endless, her reflection in the mirrored walls showing a woman who looked more confident than she felt. The dress she'd chosen, a simple black sheath she'd found at a thrift store and altered herself, was appropriate, but couldn't hide the fact that she was about to enter a world so far removed from her studio apartment they might as well be different planets. The elevator doors opened directly into Nate's penthouse. 12,000 square feet of minimalist luxury, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, furniture that looked more like art installations than places to sit, a kitchen that probably cost more than most people's houses. And Nate, standing by those massive windows in jeans and a soft gray sweater, looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. "Hi," he said, like he was the one who should be anxious. "Hi." Teresa stepped into his space, letting the elevator doors close behind her. "This is too much?" Nate finished, reading her expression. "I know. I bought it because my financial advisor said it was a good investment. An interior designer filled it with furniture I never chose. I sleep here and work here and mostly hate it because it feels like a museum, not a home." "Why don't you sell it?" "Because I kept thinking maybe someday it would feel like something other than empty." He moved toward her slowly. "And then I met you. And now all I can think about is how much better it would look with your books on those shelves and your grandmother's photos on those walls and you. Just you, making it feel real." Teresa's throat tightened. "Nate, I'm not asking you to move in," he interrupted quickly. "I'm just saying that spaces are only as good as the people who fill them, and you make every space beher just by being in it." He took her hands, "including this ridiculous penthouse." She let him pull her toward the windows, toward the view of Central Park stretching green and vast below them. The city glittered in the evening light, millions of lives happening simultaneously. She felt the dizzying awareness of how far she'd come in 2 weeks. From invisible staff to this view, this man, this impossible possibility. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly. "Of what? Of getting used to this, of letting myself believe I belong here, of forgetting where I come from and who I am." She turned to face him. "Of losing myself trying to fit into your world." "Then don't fit," Nate said simply. "Change my world instead. Make it better, more real, more human. I don't want you to become someone else. I want you to stay exactly who you are and drag me into being someone better." "That's a lot of pressure." "You're the one who challenged a billionaire at a charity gala. I think you can handle pressure." His smile was crooked. "Besides, you've already changed me. I've spent 15 years moving through life half asleep. You woke me up. That's worth any amount of pressure." Teresa studied his face, the sincerity there, the vulnerability he was learning to show her, the way he looked at her like she was the answer to questions he hadn't known how to ask. And she made a decision. Not to move in or commit to forever or pretend she wasn't terrified, just to stay, to be present, to give this impossible thing a real chance. "Show me the rest of your museum," she said. "I want to see where you actually live when you're not performing for the world." He took her through the penthouse, the guest rooms that had never hosted guests, the home office where he sometimes worked until dawn, the library that was mostly empty except for technical manuals and business books. And finally, his bedroom. It was the most human room in the entire space. Unmade bed because he'd clearly been too distracted to make it, books stacked on the nightstand, including, she noticed with a smile, a collection of Rumi's poetry, a photo of his father on the dresser. Through the open closet door, she could see clothes that ranged from bespoke suits to worn Columbia sweatshirts. "This is where you actually live," she observed. "This is where I sleep and think about you and occasionally remember to eat." Nate leaned against the doorframe, giving her space to explore. "Not very exciting." "It's human. That's better than exciting." Teresa moved to the windows. Even the bedroom had that ridiculous park view. "Do you ever feel lonely here, in all this space?" "Every day. Until recently." He moved behind her, not touching but close. Now I just feel the space where you should be. She turned into his arms, letting herself be held against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. They stood like that, for a long time, watching the city lights come on as evening deepened into night, not talking, just being together in the silence. I got the job, Teresa said suddenly. Dr. Doone called this afternoon. I start in 2 weeks. Nate pulled back to look at her face. That's incredible. Why didn't you tell me immediately? Because I needed to sit with it first, to make sure it was real, that I deserved it, that it wasn't just… She trailed off. Just because of me, Nate finished gently. Teresa, you earned that job. Tariq told me Dr. Doone called him raving about your interview. Said you had the best understanding of trauma-informed education she'd seen in years of hiring. That's you. Your knowledge, your experience, your brilliance. Tears stung Teresa's eyes. I've spent so long dreaming about this moment, and now that it's here, I'm terrified I'll mess it up. You won't. His hands framed her face with infinite gentleness. And even if you stumble, even if it's hard, you'll figure it out. That's what you do. You navigate impossible situations with grace and determination. It's one of the 1,000 things I love about you. 1,000 things? Despite her tears, Teresa smiled. That's very specific. I've been making a list. Nate's grin was boyish. Want to hear it? Not if it takes all night. Then I'll give you the highlights. I love how you challenge me without being cruel. How you speak 2 languages and think in both simultaneously. How you quote poets your grandmother taught you. How you make 400 square feet feel like home while 12,000 feels empty. How you're fierce and terrified in equal measure. How you kiss like you mean it. How you… Teresa stopped his words with her mouth, pulling him down to kiss him with all the emotion she couldn't articulate. Relief and joy and fear and love tangled together, expressed in the press of lips and the tangle of tongues and the way they clutched each other like anchors in a storm. The kiss deepened, heat building between them in the gathering darkness of his bedroom. Nate's hands slid from her face to her neck to her waist, pulling her closer. Teresa's fingers twisted in his sweater, then slipped beneath it to find warm skin that made him gasp against her mouth. Teresa, he breathed. We don't have to… I want to, she interrupted, pulling back just enough to meet his eyes. I want you, all of you, not just the conversations and the connection. I want this too. Are you sure? His gray eyes were dark with want but also concern. I don't want you to feel pressured. We can wait. I'm sure. She took his hand, placed it over her racing heart. Feel that? That's not fear. That's wanting you so much I'm shaking with it. Something in Nate's expression shifted, restraint giving way to honest desire. Tell me if you want to stop. Any time. For any reason. Same goes for you. His laugh was breathless. Trust me, that won't be a problem. He kissed her again, slower. This time, more deliberate. His hands mapped her body through her dress with reverent attention, the curve of her waist, the swell of her hips, the small of her back. She arched into his touch, her own hands exploring the planes of his chest, the muscles of his shoulders, learning the geography of him through touch and taste and sound. You're so beautiful, Nate murmured against her neck, his lips tracing the column of her throat. Do you have any idea how beautiful you are? Show me, Teresa challenged, her voice husky. Don't tell me. Show me. He did. His hands found the zipper of her dress, lowered it with aching slowness while maintaining eye contact, giving her every chance to change her mind. When she didn't, when she instead reached for his sweater and pulled it over his head with trembling hands, his control slipped visibly. They undressed each other piece by piece, revelation by revelation, until they stood skin to skin in the dimness of his bedroom with the city lights painting patterns across their bodies. Nate's hands trembled as they traced her curves, his breath catching when she pressed against him without barriers. Habibti, he whispered in Arabic. Hayati. My darling, my life. Ya Hayati, she responded, using the same endearment, claiming him as hers. Ya Ruhi. My soul. He lifted her gently, carried her to his bed, laid her down with a care that made her chest ache. For a moment he just looked at her, his expression full of wonder and want, and something deeper that made her feel seen in ways she'd never experienced. What? She asked softly. I'm memorizing this. You, here, trusting me with something precious. His hand cupped her face. Thank you. For what? For letting me love you. For loving me back. For being brave enough to believe this could work. Then he was kissing her again, and thinking became impossible. There was only sensation, his mouth on her skin, his hands learning what made her gasp, her own exploration of him drawing sounds that made her feel powerful and desired in equal measure. They moved together with the awkwardness of first times and the rightness of inevitability, learning each other's rhythms and responses. When he finally joined their bodies, they both stilled, overwhelmed by the intimacy of it. Nate's forehead pressed to hers, his breathing ragged, giving her time to adjust. Okay? He asked, his voice strained with restraint. Perfect, she breathed. Move! Please, Nate, move! He did, setting a rhythm that was tender and passionate simultaneously, his eyes never leaving hers, Arabic and English endearments falling from his lips like prayers. Teresa met him thrust for thrust, her nails digging into his shoulders, her body arching to take him deeper, everything focused on the building, pleasure, and the emotional connection that made the physical feel transcendent. I love you, Nate gasped as the tension built, as her body tightened around him. God, Teresa, I love you so much. Show me, she demanded again, using his words against him. Show me how much. He did, his hand sliding between their bodies to stroke her with deliberate precision, his mouth on her neck, her breasts, her lips, until she shattered with a cry that was his name in 2 languages. He followed moments later, his own release accompanied by words in Arabic that translated to forever and always and mine. Afterward, they lay tangled together, hearts gradually slowing, skin cooling in the air-conditioned penthouse. Nate pulled the sheets over them, gathered her close, pressed kisses to her forehead and cheeks and lips with gentle reverence. Thank you, he murmured again. You keep thanking me. Teresa traced patterns on his chest. It was mutual, you know. I know, but I'm still grateful. For your trust. For this. He tightened his arms around her. For you. I'm grateful too. She nestled closer, her head on his chest where she could hear his heartbeat. And terrified, and happy, and overwhelmed, and sure we just made everything more complicated. Probably. His hand stroked her back in soothing circles. Worth it, though? Definitely worth it. She tilted her head up to kiss him softly. Even if we're both crazy. Especially because we're both crazy. They dozed like that, wrapped around each other, until hunger and practicality asserted themselves. Nate ordered Thai food from the place in Queens they'd discovered, and they ate it sitting on his ridiculously expensive couch in borrowed sweats, legs tangled together, feeding each other bites and laughing at nothing in particular. Stay tonight, Nate said as they cleaned up the takeout containers. I'll drive you home in the morning. I'm not ready to let you go yet. I need to be home by 8. I have class at noon, and homework I've been neglecting all week. I'll set an alarm for 6. We can have coffee, I'll drive you home, and you'll still have time for your international relations reading. At her surprised look, he smiled. I pay attention. You mentioned you had chapters on peacekeeping operations due. You're very romantic for a tech billionaire. Only with you. He pulled her back toward the bedroom. Come on, let's make the most of the hours we have. They made love again, slower this time, more leisurely, learning what made each other sigh and moan and beg. Afterward, Teresa curled into Nate's side and let herself feel everything, the contentment, the love, the lingering fear that this was too good to last. What are you thinking? Nate asked, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. That I'm happy, and that happiness scares me because it can be taken away. What if it can't? He shifted to look at her. What if we're building something strong enough to weather whatever comes? What if we're the exception? People like me don't get to be exceptions. Stop saying that. Nate's voice was firm but gentle. You're already the exception to every rule. You're brilliant and fierce and brave enough to challenge the world. Why can't you be exceptional in love too? Because love requires believing in things I can't control, and control is how I've survived. I know, but maybe survival isn't enough anymore. Maybe it's time to actually live, he kissed her forehead. And maybe I can help with that. Not by fixing things, not by solving problems, just by being here, by loving you consistently, by proving that not everyone leaves. Teresa's eyes stung with tears. You make it sound so simple. It's the simplest thing I've ever done. Loving you takes no effort. It just is. He wiped away a tear that escaped down her cheek. The hard part is convincing you that you deserve it. Working on it, she whispered. Keep working. I'll keep reminding you. He pulled her closer. Sleep now. Tomorrow's a new day. You have a job to start preparing for, and I have meetings I'll barely pay attention to because I'll be thinking about this moment. Teresa fell asleep in Nathaniel Montgomery's arms, in his absurdly expensive penthouse, having just made love to a man she'd known less than 3 weeks, but who somehow felt essential. It was crazy. Impossible. Against every practical instinct she'd developed to survive, and she'd never been happier in her life. Morning came too soon. Nate's alarm at 6, groaning protests from both of them, reluctant untangling of limbs. Coffee in his kitchen while wearing his Columbia hoodie. The drive to her neighborhood in his car while discussing her upcoming work with Tariq's foundation. A kiss goodbye at her building that turned into several kisses, delaying her departure until the last possible moment. Text me when you finish class, Nate said, his hands on her waist, reluctant to release her. I will. Go to your meetings. Be a responsible billionaire. Impossible now that I know what I'm missing. He kissed her once more. I love you. I love you too. The words came easier now, less terrifying with repetition. Now go before I'm late and blame you for being distracting. She watched him drive away, then climbed to her apartment where Steve was waiting with knowing eyes and coffee. You look happy, baby girl. I am, Teresa accepted the coffee gratefully. Terrified, but happy. Good combination. Keeps you humble. Steve smiled. He treating you right? Better than I knew was possible. She paused. Uncle Steve, thank you. For not trying to talk me out of this, for letting me take the risk. You were always going to take the risk. I just made sure you knew I'd be here when you did. He pulled her into a hug. Now go shower and do your homework. Some of us still have to work for a living. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind. Teresa finished her online courses with grades that surprised even her newfound happiness apparently translating into academic focus. She met with Dr. Dune twice to review curriculum materials before her official start date. She and Nate navigated their relationship with increasing confidence, dinners at normal restaurants, walks in the park, one memorable afternoon at a bookstore where they argued passionately about translations of Arabic poetry, and the staff had to ask them to quiet down. The gossip sites eventually identified her. Mystery woman revealed, Montgomery dating former estate staffer, and the comments ranged from supportive to vicious. Teresa learned not to read them, learned to let Nate shield her from the worst of it while maintaining enough awareness to protect herself. Vivian Montgomery remained icily polite, having apparently decided that open warfare with her son wasn't worth the cost. She didn't approve, but she'd stopped actively sabotaging. Steve reported that the estate had become notably more professional in its treatment of staff, like Nate had made his mother realize that workers were people rather than furniture. Small victories. On Teresa's first day at the foundation, Nate sent flowers to her desk, jasmine, naturally, with a note in Arabic. You are always meant for this. Proud of you. Love, N. Dr. Dune found her staring at them with tears in her eyes. Boyfriend, she asked, not unkindly. Yes? Is that going to be a problem? Only if you let it interfere with your work. But Ms. Hassan, the fact that you were worried enough to ask tells me it won't be. Dr. Dune smiled. Now come on. We have curriculum to develop and displaced youth who need what you have to offer. The work was hard, demanding, exactly what Teresa had dreamed of. She threw herself into it with fierce dedication, determined to prove she deserved the opportunity regardless of how she'd gotten it. Her colleagues respected her quickly. Her insights were fresh, her understanding of displacement was personal, and her commitment was obvious. 3 months into the job, Tariq called her into his office. We're extending your contract, he said without preamble. 2 years with possibility of permanent position after that. You've exceeded every expectation, Teresa. This foundation is better for having you. Thank you, she managed, overwhelmed. Thank you. Don't thank me. You earned it. He paused. And Teresa, whatever happens with you and Nathaniel, this position is yours based on merit. I want you to know that. Believe it. She did. Finally, she did. That evening she met Nate at Rose's, their place now, where they celebrated victories and weathered defeats. He stood when she entered, his face lighting up in the way that still made her heart stutter. I got the extension, she said before even sitting down. Of course you did. He pulled her into a hug. I never doubted it. I did, constantly. I know, he kissed her temple. But you fought through the doubt anyway. That's courage. They ate Rose's incredible food, talked about Teresa's work and Nate's latest business expansion, and eventually found their way back to his penthouse that had slowly been transformed by her presence. Her books on his shelves, her grandmother's photos beside his father's, her clothes in his closet, not living together officially, but orbiting closer with every passing week. In his bed, wrapped in his arms while the city glittered below, Teresa felt something settle in her chest. Not the absence of fear. She'd probably always be a little scared of losing this, but the presence of certainty. This was real. They were real. Building something strong enough to weather complications and survive scrutiny. I love you, she said into the darkness. I love you too. Nate's arms tightened. Every day more than the day before. That's mathematically impossible. And yet, his smile was audible. Here we are, defying mathematics. We're good at defying things, rules, expectations, logic. We're exceptional at it. He rolled to face her, his gray eyes serious in the dimness. Marry me. Teresa's breath caught. What? Marry me. Not now, not tomorrow, but someday when you're ready, when the fear is smaller than the certainty. Marry me and let's make this official. Let's build a family and a future and prove that exception is just another word for us. That's not a very romantic proposal. I'll do better when it's official. Rose petals, photographers, the whole thing. But right now I just need you to know I'm in this, completely, for however long you'll have me. Teresa studied his face, saw the vulnerability there, the hope, saw the man who'd challenged her in a ballroom and kissed her in a greenhouse and loved her through every complication, saw her future, impossible and perfect. Ask me again in a year, she said softly, when I've proven to myself that I can do this, the job, the relationship, the life I'm building. When I trust this isn't a dream that will evaporate. In a year, Nate agreed. I'll ask properly. With a ring you helped design and a speech that doesn't mention mathematics or exceptions. I like that you mention those things. It's very you. Then I'll include them after all. He kissed her slowly, deeply. 1 year, and then I'm making you mine officially. I'm already yours. Teresa pulled him closer. Have been since you saw me when I was invisible. You were never invisible. I was just blind. He settled against her, both of them relaxing into the comfort of certainty. Not anymore, though. I see you completely, and I'm never looking away. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, while Manhattan dreamed around them and the future stretched ahead full of possibility and promise. 1 year later, in the Montgomery estate greenhouse where jasmine bloomed eternal, Nathaniel Montgomery went down on one knee before Teresa Hassan. Extended family watched, Vivian with reluctant acceptance, Steve with protective pride, Tariq with knowing satisfaction. Friends and colleagues who'd come to respect Teresa's brilliance and Nate's devotion filled the space with warmth. Teresa, Nate said in Arabic, then switched to English so everyone could understand. You challenged me to be better. You taught me what it means to truly see someone. You've built a life and career I'm honored to witness. You make every space feel like home and every day feel like possibility. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of the gift you've given me? Teresa looked at the ring, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds, her grandmother's favorite color captured in stone. looked at the man who'd kept every promise, who'd loved her through doubt and fear, who'd proven that exceptions were possible for people brave enough to believe. Yes, she said simply. Yes to everything. The greenhouse erupted in applause. Rosa wiped tears from her eyes. Dr. Doone nodded approval. And somewhere, Teresa thought, her grandmother was smiling, because love wasn't about billionaires and maids, about crossing impossible lines or defying social expectations. It was about two people who saw each other completely and chose each other anyway, who built something real from complications and courage, who proved that the best stories weren't the predictable ones. They were the ones brave enough to be impossible. And Teresa Hassan and Nathaniel Montgomery were nothing if not brave.